All right, you beautiful sons of bitches. We got another episode of Next Level Radio. I've been building up for this one. We've been doing our series on ex-military, current military, and everything that is encompassed within that. And we talked about everything coming back to people and networking. We were just talking about that before we hit record. It all comes back to you meet this person, they introduce you to this person. And podcast 67 with Tony Scharf, we had one of Morgan's good buddies, Tony, on, and then we introduced each other, and now we've been shooting bullets like maniacs, and it's been good, dude. So today we have, I'll have you kind of introduce yourself, and we'll just go from there.
All right. My name is Morgan Mayer Young. I've been here in North Dakota for, literally since I got out of the military back in late 2011, early 2012.
Yep.
Originally from North Carolina. I spent 2008 to 2012 in the Army, stationed in Vicenza, Italy with the 173rd Airborne Brigade.
Oh, shit.
Deployed to Afghanistan for OEF 9 and OEF 10, Operation Enduring Freedom 9 and 10. I guess we can talk more about it.
Yeah, man. You want to move that mic a little closer down?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. We've talked about it in the past, but there's a you could call it a stigma, perspective, a mentality of people that are, one, attracted to military service, and then high level at that, you know. So starting out early, was that in childhood, in high school, middle school, was that the plan?
So, this one's probably... So I grew up on Topsail Island in North Carolina, and it was literally 20 minutes at most from the back gate of Camp Lejeune, which I believe actually Camp Lejeune is the largest Marine Corps base on the East Coast. And there's Camp Geiger's there, which I believe is, and I'm not sure, my understanding has always been that it is an advanced like infantry training school for the Marine Corps for that side. So you've got one there, obviously, and then I think 29 Palms in California. And so we always had these guys that would come out of infantry training school or just basic training. A lot of them were younger guys. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they'd kind of show their butts. Yeah. And around where I grew up, because it was the beach, you know. So to me, it was always like, man, these guys are idiots. Like, I will never join the military. And I remember distinctly one of my buddies saying, you know, all of us, you're going to join the military. And we were young, you know. We were, we were probably 12, 13 years old, you know. And I had this underappreciation for military at the time, and even carrying on into later, you know. I didn't understand it, for one. And then, you know, we saw it even more, you know, kind of the wildness and stuff of Marines and things like that after 9/11, because they were deploying, you know, and they had this mindset of like they were bulletproof, you know. So I grew up watching some of these guys like show their butts and then like
be dudes on the other hand.
Yeah. And I mean, someone would get beat up and I was like, man, like, why did they have this idea? I mean, they would be little guys, you know, 150-pound Marines, you know, running their mouth like a 250-pound man. And I'm like, you know, what are they doing? And I didn't understand, you know, that mindset until I got back from Afghanistan. Yeah. And like I said, I had an underappreciation for the military until, probably right before I joined. I woke up one morning, I was working nightclub security, and, you know, I was living a good life. I enjoyed it.
It's fun as shit.
I was single.
Dude.
I had a blast doing it, you know, and if I wasn't working, I was hanging out at the bars and meeting people and girls and everything else, you know. And so I don't know what it was, but one day I woke up and, you know, I was known for waking up later because I would always be out so late, whether I was working or hanging out. Yep. And I was up at like 8:30 in the morning, and my roommate was like, what are you doing up? And I was like, I'm going to join the military. Just like that. And he was like, no way. And I came back. I had taken like a practice ASVAB with the Marine Corps, actually, because they were the only recruiter that was in the office when we went. And, you know, had my score from that and had myself signed up to take the ASVAB. So about, I don't know, maybe a week later, I went and took the ASVAB. And literally, I mean, in a month of me going and saying I wanted to join the military to dropping a contract on the table at home was about 1 month. And yeah, it was. I mean, I just had to get out of there. It was one of those things that I said, if I keep on doing this, am I ever going to leave it? Because there were guys that were working like bartenders and even night, security guys that were in their 40s, and I was like, man,
that's not a life for you.
I mean, there's good money in it because it was a college town and everything in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's a college town. We have
Fun
a university. Yeah, it was literally it's a very desirable place to live. The beach, but I just had to get out of there, and this is pre, everybody getting into drugs and things like that. It was honestly just a random thing. I got lucky and got out of there before that started being a problem. And I mean, it wasn't something that I would have gotten involved in, but the people that I was surrounded by, the friends that I had, a lot of them got sucked right in. So now I see, on social media and stuff like that, how, two guys that used to be best friends and they're like running their mouth to each other on social media about somebody stealing something or whatever, and I'm like, these two were best friends. They would have never done anything like that. But
drugs get involved.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to answer your question, no, from childhood, man, it was like the last thing on my mind.
So you had like a negative stigma against them.
Big time.
A lot of times people have that. Like Jocko Willink talks about it. Andy Stump talks about it. Like there was this offsetting look on the military.
Yeah. It just became my way out, and I was like, what's a couple of years, if I don't like it, what's a couple of years of doing this or a few years of doing this?
GI Bill and all this stuff afterwards.
All of those things. And I mean, I guess I didn't really look into it. That wasn't really a thought on my mind, because I'd done the college thing and I really didn't enjoy the college thing. And I learned a lot of things from that, I wouldn't tell somebody, if they didn't want to go to college, to go to college. That was one thing that was pushed on me.
Yep.
Now I'd say like tech school, go do HVAC, go be a welder, go do one of these things. I mean, these guys come out of that program.
9 to 12 month program.
Yeah. And it's not expensive. You can usually get Pell Grants for it and things like that. So the government's paying for you to do it, and then you're making, a lot of money.
Over 100 G's.
Yeah, depending on where you're at, absolutely.
Yep.
I still see some places and I look and they're paying like $13 for like a welder, and I'm like, good luck with that.
Yeah, go somewhere else.
I wonder what that welder's going to look like.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that I would preach now. But so I wasn't really looking at like in terms of like GI Bill and things like that. It was just, this is my time to get away, and then I can go anywhere I want.
Yeah.
Military experience, it matters on a resume. I think a lot of it, is discipline and, those types of things that employers see in that.
Yep.
And
it's almost it is a step up. It is a leg up in most situations.
It is. We just had a conversation with my best friend from the military's son. He was graduating high school, and my best friend was like, hey, what do you think about him joining the military? I was like, I think it's a great idea, and he was like, that's what I told him. And he's like, what about the Army? And I was like, that's a horrible idea.
Air Force.
So we pushed, we did. We literally pushed him Air Force, so he's looking at getting it. He's a brilliant kid, looking at getting into Air Force and going into like intelligence or something like that.
I have a high school kid that actually, he's going to be, his goal, let's say, he's going to be in the pipeline for PJ school.
And that's awesome. I mean, that's, you see those guys and they're a different breed. And it's so cool.
In the Special Forces world, a lot of people hold them as higher, like they're here.
Well, they have so many different, I don't want to say talents. They have so much knowledge. I wouldn't even call it a talent because they're taught these things, but they have to do a lot.
Yeah.
When they get in, they have to treat casualties and everything else. I mean, they control
a lot what's going on.
Yeah.
And when shit hits the fan for other units is when it's their time to shine most of the time.
That's exactly right. They call them fallen angel missions, when a bird goes down and those guys are the ones that have to go in, and whether it's like destroying equipment or, saving pilots' lives, getting the bodies out of there. Those are things that people don't usually talk about, but, getting the casualties or the KIA out. That's what we do.
Yep.
We don't leave anybody behind. So, that's a sad part of it. If you look, back in, if you look back at Black Hawk Down, that pilot was stuck with his legs, and then they cut his legs off to get the body out of there, and that was just to get him out of there so he wasn't another one of the ones that was drugged down the road.
Yep.
So,
I unfiltered. Explicit, whatever. I just kind of want you to walk us down. I mean, in the short amount of time that we've known each other too, we've had conversations about your military career and all that. And so kind of from the inception of you going into the military and then kind of walk us through your career, man. I'm fucking very interested.
Okay, so I actually joined as an 18 X-ray, which is a special forces recruit, and so when I went to basic training. I was fortunate. My drill sergeant, our senior drill sergeant, was actually a 10th Group Special Forces guy. I would say I'm one of the older guys, but there was like 3 guys that were all 27 years old, great guys. But I was 22. Yeah, I was 22 at the time. Well, I think I turned 22 while I was in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did turn 22 while I was in, but there was a lot of like 18-year-olds and stuff in there, so.
Maturity was there.
Ish. Obviously, I think a lot more came after, but there was a little bit more than some of these guys. I watched some of these guys cry, some of these kids, and I say that just in terms of experience. They cry themselves to sleep at night, or they didn't have like bathing habits and things like that. So, for being in basic training, I don't want this to sound like, I had an easy time in basic training, but being older and like understanding what your tasks were and your jobs were and the things that you were expected to do, you were treated a little bit different. You weren't targeted, by a drill sergeant because, I think a lot of times they'll break you down and rebuild you, I don't want to say into a man or a woman, but they break you down and then
to a new person.
Yeah. I mean, cause there's a lot of these kids who haven't ever experienced anything and their, I guess, ability to take crap is a pretty low, thing. So I was treated pretty well by the drill sergeants.
And basic was where for you?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Fort Benning.
Yep. So we went through basic training. You do OSIT when you join for the infantry. So I wanted to fight. I just trying to get that. Was working at getting at that earlier, but got sidetracked. So I always said, I'm not going to go there and sit at a desk. I want to fight. I want to be on the front line. And the reason that I joined as an 18 X-ray wasn't particularly because I wanted to go special forces. It was because there wasn't an infantry spot open. And I said, what happens if I get hurt or something, if I
throw you
withdraw or whatever, what do I do? And they're like, well, you've already been through all of infantry training, so you're probably going infantry. So I was like, man, this is like a win-win.
Yeah.
Obviously if I made it through selection and the Q course and everything, I'd be great. It'd be awesome. But if I don't, I still end up where I wanted to be in the first place. Yeah. So went through basic, OSIT is 1 station unit training, went to like a portion of infantry school there. Went to infantry school there, but it was, you learn things when you get to your unit. I'll say that for sure. Yeah. They just teach you the basics. I had an understanding of firearms and all those things. So, I did well in everything that we did there. Fairly physically fit at the time. I hated running, man.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I ran my PT test leading up to the, actually getting in, you had to pass the PT test, and 16 minutes was passing for 2 miles. And I ran it like 15:50. And I even walked some of it because I was drinking beer all the time and, everything else, it just was on a whim. I was like, I'm joining the military. So I got really good at running really quick. And we would do PT tests, run a ton. I mean, run so much. So there was a lot of guys that would end up with like stress fractures and things like that.
Ton of stress fractures, dude.
Yeah, shin splints, all that stuff. You see it all the time.
I did a podcast about the injuries in military.
Yeah, I mean, it's
a lot of that.
Most people's bodies aren't meant for that. Athletes, like high school, college athletes, yeah, they've been doing that stuff for a really long time. But even some of those guys, can end up that way.
You take a year off, things change.
A lot, So I did that actually during. I'd never had any major illnesses, and during basic training, it was in the winter time. Well, I guess it would have been late winter. It was like 60 degrees outside, and I've got like a beanie on, and I'm like, I've got like a field jacket liner on, and I mean, I was freezing, and I thought I was just being a bitch, because I was like, man, everybody's got to feel this way, because we would all get sick as soon as you get there. You're in a bay with 30 something guys, and everybody gets sick right away. Your feet are bruised on the bottom from doing so much road marching and running. Oh, dude. And I was on the top bunk, so every time I had to take a piss in the middle of the night, I'd jump out of bed. Oh, it hurt so bad.
The small things, dude.
Yeah. Like nice insoles. You take those things for granted. And I was really cold, but like I said, I thought I was being just a bitch about it. And one of the drill sergeants came up and he's like, "Are you cold?" And I was like, "I'm fucking freezing." And like I was almost in tears because it hurt. Like my chest hurt. I was hurting, physically hurting, And I was like, maybe everybody's, has this sickness right now, and I can't be the bitch. Yeah. If I was one of them, it'd be a little bit more acceptable, but I can't be the one. So They took my temperature. It was like 99 something, and we were going to go out on like a 4-day. They call it a bivouac, but basically training rotation where you're sleeping out in the woods. And so they took me back, and by the time I got back, it was only like an hour. I had like 103.6 temperature. I had pneumonia.
Shit.
Yep. Oh. So went to the hospital, spent like 4 days in the hospital, and like, you eat what they give you when you're in basic training. And at the hospital, they give you like a menu, and they're like, you can order anything on here. And I'm like, oh, chicken strips. Hell yeah. But I couldn't eat. I was so sick. I could not eat. Everything hurt so bad. They brought the first thing of chicken strips in, and I was like, get them out of here. I was going to throw up from the smell of them. And so I did that, and then I went right back out, and they were still in the field. So like 4 days of antibiotics and all that stuff. And then I went right back out, and we were doing like shooting and moving. And I remember I was still hurting.
Yeah.
They give you that thing that you blow into, and you got to keep the thing
ball
at a certain
up
level.
there.
Yeah. And I couldn't do that.
And you take a decline pretty quick.
It
physically
hurts.
Physically.
Like breathing hurt. I actually thought like when I'd gotten back, because at that point we didn't know I had pneumonia, I had a sharp pain, and I was like, am I having a heart attack? Like what the hell's going on? Because I didn't know anything about that stuff,
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of funny. There was a medic, an EMT. So he's a civilian, and he's used to dealing with like the young kids that are just trying to get out of training, so they act like they're hurt.
Yep.
And when he gave me the IV, I was like, man, that didn't feel right, because I'd had IVs before. We gave them to each other, And I was like, that doesn't feel right. And he's like, who's the medic here? And I was like, you are. Whatever. Mm-hmm. By the time we got there, my arm was swollen. He had actually perforated the vein, and the whole bag went into my arm. It was huge.
No.
Yeah, so I'm like in the mirror, flexing and stuff. And there was this nurse. She was the nicest lady in the world, and she was like, I showed her my arm. I was like, something's wrong. And she's like, who did this? And I was like, the EMT. And I was like, but I tried to tell him something wasn't right, because I could feel it. I could feel that it had gone through both sides.
Back in,
yeah. And now, right as soon as he did it, so it wasn't even the fact that I was taking the fluid, and I could feel when he poked through both sides almost. Shit. It was like a sharp pain I hadn't felt before when getting an IV. And I told her, I was a little snitch. I was like, man, that guy said this. And she was like, and she was like a captain in the Army. She's like, I'm going to take care of him. I was like, thank you. She was awesome. And so she took care of me. She was like mom, it was kind of that moment where I was like, man, I kind of miss my mom right now. But so
they wouldn't roll you in something like that?
No, not because of time, 4 days, whatever. And then when I came back, I went straight back to working,
Yep.
We were doing shooting and moving, and I did it, but it sucked.
Took a while to get back.
And I was running like 25. It was only like 25 yards total. So like you would like bound like 10 yards, 15 yards, and get behind, cover, and then shoot, and you would bound with your buddy. And I remember like at the end of the 25 yards, I was
dying.
Like, they were like, all right, like exercise is over. And I like turned around and I like sat down for a second. I was like, I'm screwed. Like I shouldn't be here right now. And then actually we finished off that exercise, and then like it was crazy. A couple days later, they're like, PT test, and I'm like, what? But I actually did well on it. It wasn't the times that I typically ran, but I still ran like sub 14 or something like that.
Yeah, that's huge.
My fastest ones were sub 12s. That's how much we were running. Yeah. And I always run negative splits.
And you weren't built to be a runner. Like.
Well, I was skinny and tall, so like, I probably could have been a good cross country runner, but something along those lines. So, but I was 200 pounds, 6'3", 200 pounds, and
good build.
I actually gained weight. So when I joined, because I'd gone through a lot of stressful stuff prior to going in, like relationship stuff. And I was down to like 187 pounds when I joined.
Oh, shit.
So to me, like that's skinny.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It is.
Especially like now I usually sit around 230, 235.
At 6'3", that's skinny.
Yeah. So I joined at that, but because of the, I had never really been on any type of eating schedule because I was always moving, and so eating 3 meals a day in the Army, like I put on weight. My dad did the same thing in Navy boot camp, put on like 25 pounds, So I remember, stepping on the scale at 200 pounds and I was like, and I felt good and like, looked like it was healthy weight. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, my body was using everything I was taking in. So yeah, I would run negative splits because I was always like, I don't want to gas myself and be screwed. And one of my best friends in basic training actually ran the 400 meter for VMI, Virginia Military Institute. He was a runner.
Yeah.
And he never really cared to run like good times. He's like, I know I can run. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to have a target on my back. If I start performing really well, then I'm expected to perform real well all the time. So I would always run with him the first, because he knew what he was running. He was like, right now we're running a 7 minute. We're running a 7 minute mile right now. And I'm like,
those people.
And then we'd hit that 1 mile and they'd be like 7 minutes. And I'm like, dude,
It's crazy.
You know, and he's like, so then, you know, after that first mile, we'd turn around to go back, and that's when I would start booking it, because I was like, I got some left in the tank for this, you know? So that's where I would run my negative splits and stuff like that.
Sweet.
And I'm not saying that I would run like a 7 and then like a 5 or a 4.5 or something like that. There was a guy who was like crazy fast. But, you know, I would run with him, or, you know, run ahead of him at about the first half mile.
Yep.
And then I would start, you know, I guess running my negative split. But yeah, I had some great times and stuff like that. In terms of running, I don't run anymore, but I hate it. I do enough hiking the mountains and stuff. I'm like, that should be good enough.
Yep.
So, you know, went through all that, and then went to airborne school. I'm terrified of heights.
Really?
When I say I'm terrified of heights, it's an understatement.
It's not your thing.
No. Like, I watch Fear Factor, and I'm like, nope, I'd have been the first one out.
Quite possibly the worst place to go then, airborne school.
But in my mind, I was like, man, like, I got to challenge
It's
myself.
a means to an end.
Well, it really not even that. It was, you know, when I got into to the recruiter's office, and I was like, I'm already doing something I'm not comfortable with. Yeah. You know, I'm not comfortable joining the military. So why not take it a step further, and let's see if I can do this.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? And that was probably my first real, like, experience with, like, real mental, I want to say toughness.
Yeah.
You know, because I was like, I got to do this, you know? And I'm scared of heights to the point where I don't lie to anybody about it, man.
Yeah.
Like, nobody, heck no. People are like, you know, what are you afraid of? I'm like, heights, spiders.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, and everybody's, you know, they're like, oh, girls pass this school. And I'm like, good for them.
Yeah, it's not my thing.
Still don't like freaking heights. So went to airborne school. It was cool. A lot of running. So actually, I was 200 pounds when I got there. You run so much, you run everywhere.
Oh.
So you do a ground week, a tower week, and then a jump week. In ground week, you're literally jumping off of a box onto the ground and learning a PLF, which is a proper landing fall. So, because you fall like a lawn dart, it's not like all graceful and stuff like that, man. I think somewhere you could probably read about how fast you fall, and obviously different people.
Terminal velocity and.
Well, people fall at different rates. You know what I mean? Some of the lighter guys, they look like they're floating up, and I'm like, man, I'm jealous. You know, so then you go to tower week. That was terrifying too, because you get on a 32-foot tower. The tower is 32 foot, which, you know, you think about it, it's not very high. Well, I read somewhere, and I don't know if it's true, but years ago I read somewhere, because I was just curious, and it said that at 32 feet, your brain, like, it's like in limbo. It can't decide if you're high or you're not. You know what I mean? Like 20 feet off the ground, I'm cool.
Yeah.
But at 32 feet, man, I was looking at it like, oh boy.
If shit goes wrong, it would be bad.
I'm hurting, you know? Yeah. So I think that's where it kind of plays with you, is you're like, that's a long ways down, you know? So you did tower week, and then you go into jump week. And my first jump, I mean, I was freaking terrified, dude. But I jumped, and like, there's, you know, you're supposed to count to 5 basically. And if your chute doesn't deploy, then you got to go with your reserve. And you know, with about 2 seconds, 3 seconds of turbulence, and then your chute deploys. And then it literally, I mean, being afraid of heights, and you're jumping at 1,200 feet in training, I believe.
Okay.
And then combat jumps are 800 or 850. It's been 10 years. But so, you know, that 2 seconds of turbulence, and then one of the most peaceful things I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
I mean, silence. You can't hear the plane anymore. Unless somebody's screaming on another chute near you, because, you know, they kick like 30 people out aside, you know.
A lot of people say they love it because no other thing matters in your life. Like, you are as present can be in that moment.
I mean, you could see everything. It was beautiful. It was quiet.
Finances don't matter. Relationship.
Man, and that's kind of the same thing as overseas. And I'll get to that. Yeah. But so I ended up, you know, well, you go through that 2 seconds of turbulence, and then the most peaceful thing, and then you come back to like turbulence.
Oh, shit.
Ground. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to land in the mud. So, and you know, and I remember hitting the ground. It's the one thing that like sticks with me from that first jump is I hit the ground, and I was like in shock when I hit the ground that I just jumped out of an airplane, and I forgot to pull the canopy release, which opens up your chute so it doesn't catch air again, and it caught air.
Oh, shit.
And it dragged me for like 25 feet through the mud, you know, and I laughed about it. I chuckled about it, you know. And one thing to note, if there's anybody listening that wants to like join the Army and go into airborne school, like, you don't get to take your chute off. So one of the most miserable things about airborne school, it's not anything. No, it's not anything that you do. No, you put it in a bag and everything for that. The most miserable part of it all is you don't get to go to the bathroom. And they make you drink water like no other in airborne school, because you're running all the time. You take like, what do they call those things? Like rehydration salts.
Oh, okay. Yep.
But like I forgot the one that we were taking because it actually tasted like oatmeal. It was good. Like I've actually looked for it online and haven't been able to find it. So it's not like a crappy taste to it. But you pour it in your canteen, fill your canteen up with water, and they make you drink the whole canteen, chug the whole canteen, and then put it over your head with the cap open. So you go into the shoot shed and you're all rigged up and everything, and you can't go to the bathroom.
Oh shit.
So you're sitting there, you got to piss so bad. So I've seen things on YouTube where guys are making like funny jokes about, all that stuff, about like the different training and stuff during airborne school. And one of the guys was doing a thing where he like jumps, lands, immediately drops to his knee to take a piss. Because that's what you do. You drop to your knee and you take a piss there on the ground, and then you roll your chute up, put it into your bag, and then you carry it off the field. So then I left there and I went to Fort Bragg. And so it was like kind of like a selection prep. I forgot what it was called now. It's got an abbreviation, but SFSP, something like that. But it was like a prep. So you basically go through like a mock selection and they prepare you for it because it's a lot of young guys, And I was going through that, and because of all the running through sand and all of those things, my IT band was destroyed. Never experienced pain like that in my life. Left side. Bad. Hurt so bad. And I remember finishing out this run through the sand, and like I was in so much pain, like it was bad. And I get back and I'm like, I broke something. But I ran it with everybody, finished the run with everybody. And these are like 10-mile runs and stuff, you know what I mean? So it's not like a little quick 2-mile run, 3-mile run. You're running up hills through the sand. And I mean, it was some really cool training because like I remember there was a thunderstorm that came in, lightning, huge, like lightning bolts all around, pouring down rain. And you could tell where these guys run on a regular basis because like the dirt's cut out. Yep. Like it's a big hill and the dirt's cut out right through the center, and it's from people running through the center. It's not from like man-made stuff like where people dug it out. It's from running. And all the guys, that go through selection and all those things, they do that stuff during their training process. So we were out there and I was like, man, are they going to call this? Like these lightning bolts are getting pretty freaking close. And I remember like one of the cadre looking and being like, nah,
we're going
you're at
for
Fort
it.
Bragg now, and I was like, ooh, okay. So, later on during the prep, the knee thing happened, and they basically told me, it could be up to 6 weeks recovery time here, or you can voluntary withdrawal with the option to come back, and you'll end up going to a conventional unit. Well, there was one of the cadre, really cool dude. He used to do like 24-hour mountain bike races and stuff. And his name was Sergeant First Class Vitelli. And he actually, I think he ended up going to the unit later on. So there was a rumor that the reason he was still there, and he'd been there for like 4 years. And I think there's usually like 2-year rotations. The reason was because there was a guy who went missing during like night land nav. And so what's crazy, he's actually the guy, if you watch like Inside the Special Forces or something like that, one of the History Channel things, he's the dude that does the obstacle course. Oh. The obstacle course is called Nasty Nick, and he just like zooms through the obstacle course. That's him. Dude was like from New York. I mean, had like big time Yankee accent, and like, he was a bad dude. And the reason that he was still there for so long is because when that guy went missing, they were supposed to like search certain quadrants and stuff like that to see if they could find this guy. And he searched for like an hour with his guys, and he's like, screw it, we're going on a 12-mile run. And took these guys on a 12-mile run. And they ended up finding the guy in his area. That's the rumor. I don't know if it's true. But he was a bad dude, man. But super cool, Like, he wasn't one of those guys that's like, don't talk to me. Like, he's like, if you got questions, come talk to me. Yep. So I went to him and was like, look, man, like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, from my experience, the best thing that you can come to Special Forces selection with is experience.
So go to the unit.
Go to a conventional Army unit, get a deployment in, and drop a packet when you get back. So, orders came down, and I could have stayed at Fort Bragg. I was 2 hours away from Wilmington. Yeah. But I was going home on the weekends and stuff, and I was falling right back into the same stuff, drinking and partying, fighting, and doing stupid stuff. And I was like, no, I'm getting out of here. So like one of the places was like Fort Drum, and then the other place was Italy. And I was like, man, I'd love to live in Europe. I'd travel Europe a little bit when I was younger, with a friend's family, and I was like, that place would be cool. So I ended up going to the 173rd, and I didn't know anything about their history at the time, and they had just come off of OEF-8, which Korengal Valley, the documentary Restrepo, that was Battle Company. And
Restrepo's crazy, man.
So I guess real quick to kind of go back a little bit, my buddy, the same one that said, you're going to be the one who joins the military, he joined the military right after me. Ah. And because I went to Fort Bragg, when he got out of basic training and airborne school, he went straight to Italy.
Oh, shit.
So that was kind of the thing. I actually ran into him like while I was in airborne school twice in the chow hall. And, you know, I'd wait for him to get up because we didn't have to like sit there quiet and stuff like all the normal, you know, like guys in boot camp did. We could hang out, talk, and get more food and like things that we wanted to do. Eat ice cream.
Normal human privileges.
Fairly, you know. So I watched him go out of the chow hall one time, and, you know, every time you leave the chow hall, you go over and you do like a certain amount of dips, a certain amount of push-ups and all that stuff. It's just to get guys in shape, but you just filled yourself up eating, so it was like miserable. When it should have been easy, it wasn't. Yeah. You know, and there'd be guys that like cheated and would like go run through, like stop and do like a little fake thing and then move, and there would be drill sergeants watching from their cars. And they just burn them, you know. But yeah, I left a couple of, like the 2 times that I saw him, I left behind him and went and talked to him for a little while, and it was kind of cool seeing him, you know, seeing a face that you knew.
A familiar face, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I'd already graduated, so my parents came to the graduation. The girl that I was dating back then came to the graduation and everything. So I'd seen family, but he hadn't. So he was one of my best friends growing up. Good for him, too. Yeah, he was one of my best friends growing up, you know. Like, we raised hell together. And he joined the Army because of me. He saw me get out of there. He's the one, you know, that made the comment. And then, of course, he joins because of me. And we ended up in Italy together. It was amazing, you know. Crazy. So I had him to show me around. He was in battle company. Okay. So the guys from, you know, the documentary Restrepo, I know a lot of those guys, and they're incredible guys. And I mean, you know, battle company went through hell. That was when Sal Junta was the first Medal of Honor recipient, living Medal of Honor recipient since Vietnam. And then Chosen Company had 2 Medal of Honors after that from the same deployment, you know. Yeah. And
then you had a little later, like Dakota Meyer, a little later after that one, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember when his actually happened, though, because like Sal got his fast.
Yeah.
Once they gave him his, it kind of opened the floodgates for everybody else. Exactly. They started giving him to guys that did stuff long before.
And communications and more technology. You know, like it wasn't just like a word of mouth thing. I mean, it was not easier by any means.
No, there was more pressure to give out those medals. Yes. I mean, you know, when you look at the things that some of these guys did, you know, and then you look at the things that the guys in Vietnam did, and I would have never wanted to be in Vietnam, and like, you know, knowing the older guys that I know, I'm like, oh, there's some hard dudes. Yeah. You know? And then seeing, like, you know, they're 2 completely different places, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, completely different, you know what I mean? Completely different enemy, everything. But, you know, you can compare some of the things that these guys did in Iraq and Afghanistan, like the heroic things that they did, the valorous things that they did. And you know, I wish I can remember the guy's name right now. The black guy that pulled a bunch of guys out of a burning Humvee while he was on fire. Oh, really? And I can't remember his name. But I believe I read a couple of months ago that they finally said he's going to get the medal. He's no longer alive, you know, but he's finally going to get the medal. And it's, you know, why would that take so long? He was on fire pulling these guys out of there.
Are you talking Crispy?
No. Oh. This is a guy, I cannot remember his name.
Because I know Crispy, he got burnt to all hell.
Yeah. And some guys in the truck and everything passed. But if you want to look it up really quick, look up, God, what the heck is his name? I cannot remember it right now. But I just read recently he's getting it. But you look at that, and this happened in like 2004. You know, and you're like, why? Mm-hmm. I think he got a Distinguished Service Cross initially, but it's like, how do you give that a Distinguished Service Cross? And then like some of the other, you know, situations that earn people Medal of Honors, you know, how do you not give that man that? Because, I mean, he legitimately was on fire pulling these guys out of there, you know, and ended up dying from burns. I don't know if it was months later or whatever it was, you know. But these guys in Battle Company, I mean, like, you could see it on them. They had, between Battle Company and Chosen Company, that was 2nd Battalion, 503rd. We were the first, I was in 1st Battalion, 503rd, but their barracks were right across from mine. And my best friend was in that company. So the guys that I met, like, this is, you know, like I said, happened in OEF 8, and I got there in late 2009. And some of these guys, I mean, you could still see it on them. Yeah, I mean, you could still see it on these guys.
This was the height of it. Like, when we were taking the height of the entire war, really. Yeah, and this is when a lot of the, again, Medal of Honors, but a lot of on the opposite end of the spectrum. We took a lot of losses. We took a lot of things.
This was right around the time that everything happened with Clint Romachet. I mean, literally right around that same time. You know, he's the guy that the Medal of Honor recipient that lives in Minot. Yep. They did the movie, The Outpost. But that was same time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I believe that happened in 2009. So these guys, this was 2008 when this stuff happened to those guys. So you can imagine during that period, I mean, it was heavy casualties. Yeah. Even into 2010, and I'll tell you why, I know that, there was heavy casualties because we were fortunate. My unit was fortunate. Some amazing leaders. Like I couldn't say better things about the people that I worked with. Yeah. The most incredible leaders I've ever known in my entire life. Wow. And honestly, I think between that and just sheer luck is why we didn't, we had casualties but no KIAs. So, I knew those guys and they talked about their deployments or their deployment. Some of them had multiple. And, hearing the stories and stuff, it wasn't something that like put you in fear of going over, but like you were ready and seeing like the guys that had come back and were still in the unit together, like the bond that they had, the friendships that they had and things like that was incredible, So got there, we did I think ours was called JRTC. It's either JRTC or JMTC. One's here in the U.S. and one's over there in Europe. Yep. We did the one in Europe, obviously. But we don't actually do any live fire training in Italy. We have like a 25-yard range on post, but our post is like the size of like 4 of these blocks here in Dickinson. Yeah. It's tiny. It was tiny. When I first got there, my buddy met with me, and we literally walked the entire perimeter of the post in like an hour.
Oh, shit.
So it's that small. We actually like rent it from the Italians. The Italians run everything. Like I want to say probably like 75% of the people employed on that post that aren't active military are Italians. They're not U.S. contractors. And then like, when you're coming through the gates and stuff, it's run by the carbon area, which is like military police over there. So we did a training rotation in Germany, in Hohenfeld, Germany with the Slovenians. And so because you always do like joint exercises and stuff when you do those types of things. And I mean, we definitely saw a difference in training. They had women in the infantry. And it was all, you have a blank firing adapter on your rifle, and then there's an OP4, an opposing force. So you basically do a mock deployment. And I mean, we did really well. And then shortly after that, they told us where we were going. So, obviously they told us where, and then we started like kind of poking around trying to find out what it was. Yeah. It was the Tangi Valley in Wardak province, Afghanistan. And, once we start looking into it and stuff like that and getting on, you can get online and Google Tangi Valley, and they call it IED Alley.
It's bad.
There was one road that ran through the center. So this is like November, like late November, we deploy, and there's one road that runs through the center of the valley, and then on one side, I mean, it's a 20, 30-foot cliff down to the orchards, because it's a valley where the river runs through and everything, Great farmland, amazing. It's beautiful in the summer. And then on the other side of the road, I mean, there's a 60-foot cliff, rock cliff. I mean, straight up and down. At some points, you could walk out on the cliff, and you literally have to look under to see
an overhang.
The edge of the river. Yeah, it was wild, So actually during... in the 80s when the Russians invaded, the Russians lost an entire tank division in that valley. And there's still like old rusted up tanks on the side of the road.
I'm looking at kind of like a map right now. The Tangi Valley, you're just southwest of like Kabul.
Yes. Yep. I want to say, we always said 50 kilometers, but then I see things nowadays and they're like, oh, like it's different distances and stuff, but roughly 50 kilometers.
That helps put it in my head a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's a beautiful valley in the summer. I'll have to send you pictures. I mean, I had a buddy that took a panoramic picture, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Really?
And it has our base in the picture, and then he has another picture from in the winter. That was in the summer, and then he has another picture from the winter, and it's like bare,
totally
nothing
place.
on the trees. Because they were apricot orchards and apples, and I mean, we would sit in an orchard and just pick the fruits off the tree and eat it. You know what I mean? It was a good change from MREs and things.
Yeah.
And then like I remember walking through an onion field and different things like that. And beautiful farmland. Like they said, like that one of the squares. I don't even know how they measure that because I know it wasn't acres, but much smaller than that. But one of those squares would have costed in U.S. dollars $25,000, which is a ridiculous amount of Afghan money. You know what I mean? So. We deployed, spent, you could come into Bagram and start kind of getting ready and preparing for people to start shipping out to the base by helicopter because you come in on a plane. Bagram was a big air base. I don't know if it's exactly shut down now.
Yeah.
You know, with everything, I would assume it is, but that thing had been running since the 80s, you know. And then I was fortunate. So one of the guys that I went to college with when I was in college introduced me to a bunch of his friends. He was from Wilmington, Delaware. His name's Gabe Dominelli, really cool dude. Family's amazing, you know, and he introduced me to some of the coolest people I've ever met, you know, and they were from Wilmington, Delaware. So he moved to Wilmington, North Carolina from Wilmington, Delaware. And I remember going back for holidays and stuff like that with him to hang out with his family because my mom was on the road. My brother was living in Philly. My sister was living in Philly. So I would go up to Delaware and then travel over to Philly to be with my family for the holidays. And I met some of his friends. Well, I had been following one of his really good friends, a guy named Ben, on Facebook, and he was in Afghanistan. And he was Air Guard, so Delaware Air Guard. And I messaged him, I think, at one point and was like, you know, where are you at? And he's like, Bagram. And I was like, okay. And so I ended up there, and I was sitting in like the MWR. It was so random, and I was thinking to myself, like, all these Air Force guys walking. I didn't know anything about being in country, man. So I saw an Air Force guy, and I was like, they all must know each other, you know. So like to ask the guy, I'm like, hey, do you know this guy? And they were like, I don't know. And I was like, he's Delaware Air Guard. And one of the guys was like, he's that little short guy with a loud mouth. And I was like, that's him. And he's like, actually, yeah, they work with us. So I was like, could you take me there? So you know, it was. I think at that point, you know, it was probably early December because you spend a little bit of time there just for them to get the logistics. It was so busy at the time, you know. And I got to hang out with them for like a day. And I was actually supposed to go see him the next morning. We were going to get breakfast and hang out. And I hadn't seen him in probably, I don't know, maybe 2 years since then. And then in the middle of the night, they came and woke us up. And they were like, all right, we're shipping out. But that same night, I had a guy that was in the huts with us. And I was talking with him. And he was like, where are you going? And I was like, Tangi Valley. And he's like, ooh. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, my job is to map the whole country. So he literally on his computer had a map of the entire country. And I was like, can you show me the Tangi Valley? And he's like, yeah, you know. So he shows me the road traveling through the center of the Tangi, and it looked like a checkerboard. And I was like, why does the road look like that? And he's like, oh, when there's an IED, they have to go patch the road up. And I was like, oh.
Well, me not having any military experience, just being so fucking attracted to it.
Yeah.
I've heard of the Tangi Valley. And I'm completely out of it.
So, you know, the major thing with the Tangi Valley has been the SEALs.
Yeah.
When the SEALs were killed, Extortion 17. Actually, that was the exact same, and obviously I'll talk about it in a minute, but that was the exact same town that I was injured in. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I remember where I was when I heard the news and everything. I was still in the Army, you know. So my first introduction to Afghanistan, first mission, we would do just a lot of what are called KLEs, key leader engagements. And, you know, you go into these towns and meet with the elders and see what we can give them because we were playing the hearts and minds game. Like we were trying to earn people's trust and make friends, which, you know, in all reality, that's
hard. And
it's hard,
still
but
early
it's
enough.
Important. You know what I mean? The importance of that is, you know, you want as many friends as you can get in a place like that, you know, especially with an enemy like we were fighting. So we go out and we walk through the bazaar in a place called Jewi's Rin, and it's empty. But we had never done, you know, any of the missions there. So for us, we didn't understand, you know, what it was supposed to be like. It's something that you learn when you're there for a period of time. And we went out, I think we may have met with one or two elders and kind of mapped out the area, saw what we were working with. And then on our way back, our point man stepped over a wall because he could have taken an easy route. But we always knew, like, you take an easy route and you're at risk of something bad happening because, you know, they're always going to, I mean, just like a deer, you know, when you're putting trail cameras out and stuff, you pick choke points and, you know, heavy traveled trails and things like that. So he actually jumped over a wall, which I was pissed because I was like, man, we got to come over this wall and I'm carrying all this gear and it's heavy and I got to climb that freaking thing. Well, as soon as he went over the wall, there was, you know, big explosion. And he had landed on an IED that was actually daisy chain mortars. But the way that they had buried the mortars, they had the idea that, like, a mortar, they buried it fins down, you know, and when a mortar shoots and explodes, it hits and the fins are up, you know. And somehow EOD said the way that they had buried that is what saved his life. When the IED went off, he actually had only landed on one because they had stretched it out to where had we taken the easy route, it would have stretched out over like 8 people, you know. But he landed on one, it exploded, you know, And he was very fortunate, lost one of his fingers and 3 feet of his large intestines.
Wow.
You know, and I say he's fortunate. It sounds horrible saying he's fortunate and then telling you the injury. But, you know, I mean, he's got kids and a wife, and I mean, you know, so that was like welcome to Afghanistan for us. You know, we were like, oh boy, here we go. You know, now we know like this is a big deal. And they had lost 13 MRAPs before we got there because the unit before us was driving MRAPs on the road, getting blown up and not changing their tactics.
Oh, shit.
And they had lost a handful of guys, you know, so we decided like, man, we're walking. You know, and that was a unit out of Fort Drum, a 10th Mountain unit. And, of course, you know, like Airborne has this pride where they're like, you know, we run, we're fit, blah, 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 blah. So, of course, our leadership was like, we're walking. And, I mean, in all reality, I was like, well, I'm kind of happy we're walking.
No kidding.
You know, because we responded, you know, we went on missions and stuff after that, and everybody was really wary, but, like, we knew that, like, this is it. I mean, you can't run around scared and worried about what's going to happen because then you're just going to cause somebody else to get injured. So, you know, we all kind of, and that actually happened like a few days before Christmas.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was kind of a crappy deal. But, you know, we started doing missions and all that stuff, and then we had a convoy came through the valley to bring us some supplies. And we overwatched this convoy, and they came in and didn't get blown up and everything. And that was like the first convoy that had made it into the valley in years without getting blown up. And then on their way out, they got blown up. Everybody lives, so that's the only reason I kind of have like a little chuckle about it. I know it's kind of dark, but you know, one person was injured pretty good, but he was actually a guy that used to be in our company. Prior to that deployment, he had moved to another company to be one of the leaders. And he's doing great. I mean, you know, he hurt his back or whatever, but I mean, it was crazy. So I guess what I was getting at there, like the vehicle thing, you know, we hadn't been in any vehicles, and they were like, we've got to be QRF for this. And I'm like, okay, like, let's gear up and let's go. And they were like, no, we're going mounted. And I'm like, what? Like, why are we doing that? Like, they just got blown up. And they were like, well, if they got blown up, then there's a good chance that, you know, there's not any other IEDs
up to that point
and there. And I'm like, yeah, good luck. I'm going to be on a turret. Like,
you
can tell me there's a good chance, but you know, I'm like walking Murphy's Law. So I don't really, so, you know, we ride and there's a thing called a crow system. And it's actually like you have a joystick and you have a TV screen in front of you, and you move it, and there's a camera on the gun, and it moves the gun and stuff like that. So we have 3 trucks. Front truck's got a crow system, middle truck's got a crow system, and then there's Morgan in the back hanging out in an open turret with a decal. And I'm like, man, this is crap, you know? And normally, you know, they hit like front trucks and rear trucks and things like that to trap, you know? So, like, I mean, that was a pucker moment, you know?
Yeah.
Went down, responded to that, but when I saw like you know, because we hadn't, the IED that my buddy had stepped on didn't look that bad in the ground because it was buried in like dirt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it didn't leave like a huge hole or anything. But then this IED that we went to and responded to there, like the fact that everybody lived and seeing, I mean, I could stand in the hole, and if you were standing on the road, you wouldn't see the top of my head. Oh, shit. It was that deep. It was like a 500 pounder. So 500 pounds of homemade explosives that they blew up on that road. And the problem with that, you know, cliff on the side is that you can dig into the side of the cliff and then bury it in the road, and you didn't have to dig in the middle of the road or anything like that. You know what I mean? And then they learned stacking IEDs and the way that stuff worked, and a bunch of other stuff like techniques that they learned throughout time, but we didn't see much of that. So, you know, that one was a rough one, and you know, it got pretty kinetic in starting in March because I went home on leave, and they had gotten in a pretty good gunfight right before I got back. And then...
how long was leave for you?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah. And actually, it was kind of cool. I ran into a guy I was in basic training with in, I don't remember, Kuwait.
Yeah.
They were pulling out of, that's when they literally had announced they were pulling out of Iraq. So his unit, he'd only been there for like 6 months, and they were pulling out. They were leaving Iraq.
Wow.
Yep. So I got to hang out with him for a little bit and talk with him. That was kind of cool seeing him. I mean, you know, kind of the small.
Yeah.
I mean, the Army's big when you think about like how many personnel are in it, but it's not really that big, you know, when you have a specific job and there's only a specific number of units that have that job and things like that, you know. So I came back. They got in a pretty good gunfight before I got back, and then, I mean, all hell broke loose. We started working with our Afghan Army. You know, we've been working with them. We had Khalil was their Afghan Army commander. The guy was incredible. Yeah. Shaved face, bald. I mean, never had hair on his face. He hated Afghans. He was Afghan. He absolutely hated Afghans. Really? He fought with the Russians against the Mujahideen. He hated Afghans, but he was in charge of them. So I mean, seeing him the way he was with those guys, I was like, glad you're not my leader. But he was a bad dude. I mean, he wasn't afraid of a gunfight. He wasn't afraid of things. You see a lot of things. Like if you caught guys smoking hash and stuff, he beat the shit out of them. Oh yeah, dude.
Legit guy.
Yes. So we started working. JSS is a joint security station, and they had JSS Evans was a house that they had taken over from a family, paid them for it, and it was at a point in the valley we couldn't see with raid cameras and things like that, the things that would typically be used to monitor more. Yeah. And we wanted presence in that end of the valley. So we were working with the Afghan police at that time. So we had a couple of Afghan Army guys that would go out with us rather than the whole unit. And we would go man the station with the Afghan police. So JSS Evans, we would run like 1 week rotations. One platoon would be there for a week. Another platoon would be like missions in QRF, and another one would do like cop renourishment. Like, because I mean, the unit that was there before us had only been there for 6 months, and when they got there, it was a hole in the ground. And they're trying to run missions. They're trying to build the cop up. They're trying to do all these things. So when we got there, we looked at this place and we were like, man, we're dead. Yeah. And then by the time we left, it was a freaking fortress. You can actually, this is horrible, but you can go online and look up, like Mujahideen takes U.S. base. And that was because the unit after us ended up being pulled out of there, gave it to the Afghan army, and the Afghan army gave it to the Taliban. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it ended up being like a pretty badass spot. Yeah. So we would do our week down there, and then we would keep a few guys on guard while a handful of us would go out and do missions into these villages and do the key leader engagements and things like that. So, I mean, I couldn't even tell you which rotation it was, but we're into July of 2010, and we got engaged by a sniper that had been shooting at us on and off for a while, and somebody saw a dust signature. And, I mean, we lit him up, and we didn't really... He
had been getting after you guys for a while.
A long time.
Yeah.
And close. He wasn't a bad shooter. Mm-hmm. A handful of very, very close calls. So, we engaged him, and we couldn't go... This area, we didn't go out and do a BDA, and the reason being is like, most of the orchards in this valley were beautiful, well-groomed and everything, but this area where we were looked like complete shit. With weeds and everything else, because the farmers were terrified to go out there and tend to the crops because it was such a kinetic environment right there. I mean, you could go out there and be sitting in the valley and look up, and any tree you looked at had riddled in bullet holes from gunfights. So we didn't want to send anybody out there and get anybody injured or anything like that, And most of the time, there are guys that know, like, there's going to be somebody going out and doing something, and if you shoot a guy and it takes you a while to get there, he's gone.
Yeah.
Like, we actually dropped dropped a Hellfire on like 7 guys one time. And by the time we got to them, because they were like 3 miles away, all there was like blood and a couple pieces of like bone and a shoe. And we watched them on a drone come out and pick up pieces of the bodies.
Jesus.
That's how they do it, though. They got to get them out of there and get them buried before dark. So, it was getting, that was probably fairly early in the afternoon, and it was hot outside. I mean, it was hot. So we had all like kind of dropped our blouses or whatever you want to call it, our jackets, and we had body art, like our plate carriers were just over regular T-shirts, almost all of us, because we weren't worried about people telling us a uniform we couldn't wear where we were. Yeah. There was no brassos coming out there. So, we're sitting there, and this is, getting to be later in the afternoon, and I'm having a conversation with Khalil, the Afghan army guy, and I'm real broken English, but I mean, I could conversate with him,
Yeah.
And he asked me if I had a lighter, because he smoked cigarettes, and I didn't smoke cigarettes unless we were getting mortared, and then I smoked a lot.
Yeah.
But I said I don't, but I just eaten a vegetable lasagna MRE, and I remember that because we didn't have crap for MREs left. We were supposed to get these things called speedballs dropped in their body bags full of supplies. Helicopter flies over, kicks them out. And we were getting that night. And we were running out of everything, so I ate a vegetable lasagna MRE, and in every MRE, there's a pack of waterproof matches. So I bent down to pick up the waterproof matches, and there was a fighting position in the wall, and I heard a loud boom and could tell it was something outgoing. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw, the RPG coming. Khalil was still standing up. I was bent over, leaned up against the wall, actually. And it's not like the movies. Mm-hmm. It's not like boom, whoosh, and then you can like dive out of the way. It's fast. I mean, it's boom, boom. And this guy shot it from 60 meters away. So the fact that my eyes moved that way fast enough to even see it coming was kind of a surprise because it's that fast.
Yeah.
So I heard the boom. I looked out of the corner of my eye, and I mean, it looks like a glowing red football. I'd always heard the joke, and I was like, whatever, like these people have never seen an RPG. Well, if anybody's wondering, it really does look like a glowing red football. Fuck. And it actually ended up hitting just above that fighting hole because it wasn't very low on the wall. And it hit the sandbag that I was up against. I didn't know that at the time. It was my platoon sergeant later told me that it was. He's like, dude, it was literally the one that your head was up against. Yeah. So I mean, it rung my bell, and it happened. It blew me aside into my machine gunner and knocked him out of where he was sitting, and I was out cold. And I remember, I woke up, and it sounds like popping popcorn in the microwave,
Yeah.
And it burned everything on this side of my face, arm, neck, back, everything burned. And I mean, my mom supported me joining the military. But I think every kid, like every person that joins the military is like, I promise I won't get hurt. Yep. Literally when I woke up, I was like, oh man, I'm sorry, mom, cause I thought I was messed up. The way everything felt. And then I can literally hear guys like right next to me and they're like, because they called me Mayor. Nobody wanted to say my whole last name. Yeah. Everybody's like, Mayor's down. He's fucked up. And I'm like, and they could see me, but I couldn't see shit. My eyes were filled with dirt and everything else. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I reached over and I ran my hand down my arm. And when my two hands touched, I was like, ooh. It's kind of like a bright moment, Yeah. And, but like I said, I had no dexterity in my fingers and stuff like that. It hit me so hard. I couldn't like pick things up. I couldn't hold things.
Your central nervous system was fried.
Dude. Rolled off the roof, and it was a lot further than a
roll.
It was a long ways to the ground. And I got body armor and everything on, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I roll over, and actually, I'm sorry, me and my machine gunner checked each other for like shrapnel and stuff, and I had a little bit of blood and stuff. I had like a 1 week beard, and because we were literally leaving the next day. Yeah. That we were literally leaving to go back to the cops so the other guys could come replace us the very next day. That night, actually. So... I think a lot of us were probably complacent. It's just how it goes. You're so tired of being there for a week, stuck in the same place, eating the same thing, barely getting any sleep. The flies are incredible. Like, it's hot, Literally, I would sleep inside of a sleeping bag in 100-degree weather just to stay away from the flies, because I never got a mosquito net in basic training or any of those other things, any of the, stuff. So, me and my machine gunner check each other, and then I realized, like, I can't do anything for him. I can't link rounds. I can't do any of that stuff because he was already up firing.
Oh, shit.
Like, he hit the ground, and it didn't knock him out. So he hit the ground, he bounced right back up, and boom, he's on the trigger. That's what the popcorn was, So he actually received a Bronze Star with Valor because they were trying to overrun us. They estimated 60 fighters. There were 32 of us. And he held off the attack for long enough for everybody to get their shit together and get in the fight, I got checked out by my platoon or my squad leader, who, I mean, he was awesome. He was from North Carolina, so we had a lot in common. I remember the first time I got in his squad, he was like, "Do you like NASCAR?" I was like, "Man, I fucking love to go to a race, but I don't like watching it on TV." He's like, "It's good enough for me." I was like,
boring as all hell.
Yeah. He's from Sparta, North Carolina, an amazing guy.
Sparta?
Sparta.
Okay.
Yep. So we called him Dad because he was a little older than I think he was like 37. But he was an incredible dude. Like, cared about all of us, but like, he was like, Dad, like, you got shit to do. You get it done, then you can play. You know what I mean? So he checked me out. Everything was good, and it was time to get back in the fight, So got back in the fight, and then it hit me. I didn't realize it immediately. I was like, "Where's Khalil?" Like, he was with me, but because that's how much it rung my bell. Like, I used to scrap a lot when I was younger, and I've been hit in the face and things like that. But like, this was different. On a different, dude. This hurt my pride. It took everything out of me. Like, it was one of those things where, like, I felt like a child afterwards, man. Like, it put me in another place.
A different dimension, dude.
Because it was it was, I mean, the explosion was so close. It was so extreme. And
I wonder what like you said, it's very fast, but I wonder what, like, the feet per second is on a fucking
I don't know about an RPG. I know that, like, if you look up, like, HME, like ammonium nitrate, which is what IEDs are made out of, which is actually also tannerite, it's insane.
Oh, it's the same thing as tannerite.
Yeah, so if you actually look it up, I mean, tannerite is basically HME. Yeah. It's not ammonium nitrate, but it's something like ammonium nitrate. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's very, very, very close. Because the first time I heard tannerite go off, I was like, dude, that sounded like an IED.
You're looking 400 to 500 feet per second.
That might be the RPG.
Yes, just the RPG is what I'm saying.
Oh, how fast it travels. Yeah, no, the actual explosion, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of feet per second. Yeah. The actual blast from it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Once
it implodes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, when I realized Khalil was, with me, I was like, where's Khalil? And they were like, he's fucked up. And I was like, where's he at? And there was like a little hallway in the house, and they were like, he's in there. So I peeked down there, and he's got a phone in one hand calling his wife. He was a badass. He's just like, hey, I got hurt, Dude, he was like, he was a man, and one of my buddies was stuffing gauze up his arm because it had pretty much taken his arm from him, shrapnel his neck, chest, and everybody that looked back at like the videos were like, dude, had you been standing up, you would have been unscathed, but you wouldn't be here. I mean, as a fraction of a second, I was probably standing up when the guy fired the RPG, to be honest, or when the guy's brain
told him
to pull the trigger, and then there was a difference in the time of
grabbing the matches,
the reaction to actually pulling the trigger. I had bent down. You know what I mean? It was fucking
again training and preparation and all this shit. This is just luck.
That's why, I talked about leadership and then just sheer luck. And that was one of the ones that I believe was just sheer luck. There was nothing. I didn't know the guy was there. None of us did, and I wasn't like,
you guys weren't obviously, but
no, we had just gotten in a little tussle, with the sniper, and we were excited, so
no returning shots. You were,
I mean, we had guys on guard watching. We were glassing stuff, like all that stuff, and it just came out of left field, man. I mean, like it felt like getting sucker punched with a Mack truck, man. Like, and they actually said when I woke up, I was like, RPG, and they're like, yeah, no shit. Because that's my brain. Like when I woke up, I was like RPG. Yeah. But I'd already, there was however long it was since I'd gotten hit until I woke up. And they were like, they actually said we got hit with 2 more since then. Same position. So they initiated it in our position because that's where we were firing from at the sniper. So we were a threat. So they initiated the ambush on our position. And Khalil, because of his injury, we had to get him out. So they called in a medevac. Actually, my buddy Frank Sacchetti, he's still a really good friend of mine, ended up being a helicopter pilot later on in his career. But he called in. He was like, that was the crazy part, is like me and him were so close. For him to be able to do that, it just wasn't. And he was a little bit older, but it was a testament to like his training. Me and him were super close. Worked out together all the time. He was actually in my platoon, but my other buddy, who I say literally was like my best friend in the Army, he was in another platoon. So me and Frank were always on missions together, always working out together, and that sort of thing. But he called in a medevac for Khalil. At the time, I didn't realize it was for me too. So we had to get Khalil out of there, and we had a HLZ behind the cop, and we had to get back there to get to it, to get the casualties out. And we had to fight our way to it.
How fucked up was he?
Khalil?
Yeah.
He was messed up, when you have shrapnel in a lung, I mean, you're looking at collapsed lung and needle decompression with his arm. I mean, it was pretty much gone. It was hanging on by ligaments probably.
Right at the elbow?
Skin. Yeah. I mean, my buddy said that he literally shoved like this much of his hand up when he was shoving gauze in to pack it. Yeah. Even though it was, tourniqueted off, he was like, dude, and he's one of those guys that like doesn't talk, like if it's nasty, he like tries to make it seem like
downplay it,
like he loved it. But he was like, literally when he came to me, he was like, dude, that was the grossest thing I've ever done. Like I said, he's usually the ones that's like, if it's something gross, he's like, yeah, heck yeah. No, he wasn't like that after that.
Damn.
Like he was like, that was awful. That was one of the worst things I've ever done. So me and him, we fought our way to the HLZ with a couple of guys. We had to carry a cot. We didn't have a litter. So we actually had a cot that you would sleep on, and we had to carry it up the mountain. And like literally guys were providing cover fire, and then we were fighting our way up the hill. So we get over there, and at that time, I still didn't know I was getting taken by the helicopter. And when the helicopter came in, you cover the casualty to make sure that there's no rocks, no more damage done. Yep. So we covered them, and then we load them on the bird, and they're like, where's the other casualty? And I'm like, there was only one. And then my platoon sergeant who was with us is like, no, you're going. And I mean, I had tears in my eyes. I was like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave these guys, And I remember I was so close to crying because I did not want to leave them. I was going somewhere safe and they weren't safe. You know what I mean? So it was like, to me, like it hurt. It physically hurt my heart to have to leave these guys because I felt like I was still capable. But, he brought up a great point. So from a young age, me and you had talked about it before, head injuries and things like that. brain swelling and those types of things. And he said, if something happens because of, the brain injury between now.
There's an onset after,
And he said, if something happens, we don't know that we can get another bird in here to get you.
Yeah.
So that was when I was like, fuck, like then I'm a liability, then
it's a coin toss at that point.
So I'm more useful to them leaving right now because there was already QRF coming out. We already had like helicopters, like Apaches were coming in. Yep. We could actually call in for air support at this point because it was that bad, Mm-hmm. And we didn't get air support frequently. Yeah, because where we were, normally we'd have like a bird that was checking in, headed back to Shank at the time to go fuel up. So they check in, they'd be like, checking on, and like 5 minutes later, they're like, all right, we're low on fuel, we got to go. And we're like, dude, like we're still in a fight. Yeah. So, I knew they were coming. So like, a couple different things went through my mind and I was like, all right, I'll go. So I flew back with him. He was a little stressed out being on the bird and being away from everybody that he knew, I think, So I was sitting there with him. They tried to give him an IV and he fought it because he'd already had one bag in, but they were trying to give him one in his other arm and he fought it because I think it was like antibiotics and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure, but he was fighting it and I was like, Khalil, like let him do it, and I let him give me an IV because they were going to give me one anyway. And when they gave me, he let him do it, and I sat there with him and just kind of talked to him and everything on the flight. And the thing, between Apaches and Blackhawks is the Blackhawk actually has like a jet engine that kind of propels it, so they're fast. Apaches aren't.
Yeah.
So like literally we're leaving after getting picked up and we pass the Apaches. And they're not supposed to leave without gunships. So your medevac birds are not supposed to leave without gunships.
Oh.
But they were like, we got to go, And so that's like a testament to those pilots and how incredible they are and what they do, I mean, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. The way that, because this guy, I mean, when they came flying in, this valley was tiny. We knew that there was enough room to get a Blackhawk in there, but it wasn't much more than that.
Yeah.
So this guy flies into this valley, hauling ass, spins the bird sideways and slides literally right up to my shins. And I was like, God knows,
Yeah.
I mean, they were incredible. Dust off pilots are amazing. So, after that, I spent a couple of days in Shank because of the injury. Like, they cut my clothes off me and everything. I'm like, I can take them off, but they just, didn't want me to do too much. I had a bunch of mace tests and stuff for brain stuff. And then actually, like, the next day after my guys had gone back to Cop Tangi, which was our little base, they had actually flown some of them out. Oh. Because the fight, it was a long fight. I mean, they took RPGs and I mean, there were a ton of things that happened in there. So they wanted to medevac a lot of those guys and make sure that they didn't have any serious injuries. Obviously Khalil's being the most serious. And then, beside that, my brain, or I guess my TBI was pretty dang serious.
Started probably getting worse.
Yeah. I mean, it was still kind of slow at that point because I was there for like 4 or 5 days. And then I went back to to Cop Tangi and started going on missions again. And, all my buddies and stuff were there and I would have conversations with them. And then, I told you after a couple of days of that, they were like, hey man, like you told us that story. You told us the same thing like 3 times in the last 30 minutes. So I went to call my mom, and she had the same phone number that she's had for like 20 years. And I forgot the phone number.
And that's shit you remember back then.
You
still
broke
remember
my heart.
I still remember my home landline when I was that age. Nowadays we don't remember each other's numbers because we got this
technology. Yeah. And at that time, like the iPhone had just come out before I left for the Army.
So that was ingrained.
Yeah. And people's names and stuff I was forgetting. So I went to, we actually had the battalion PA on our little base. It was a little base on our little base because of predicted casualties during our deployment. So they put the battalion PA on our base. So I went to him and was like, hey man, here's the deal. And he was really cool. Doc Z, great guy. Older guy, like, cool as shit, and I said, hey man, here's an issue. And he's like, you got to go. So they sent me back to Bagram. And I was in a TBI clinic there for a couple of months. And it was so crazy. And I would see a neurologist every day and like all these different things, and one thing that was crazy, was like some of the guys that I was in there with like a lot of, combat engineers and stuff where like guys that are operating,
getting blown up.
Dude, like, one of the dudes, he's like, this is the 13th time I got blown up, sent me here. I'm like, what?
Holy shit.
You know what I mean? And he was a different duck, and I'm like, well,
makes sense.
I should have came here a couple ago. But then, the meds and stuff that they had you on, it didn't help. They put a lot of these guys on like Ambien and things like that for sleep.
Fuck.
But then you had people that would like get up and sleepwalk and stuff like that. And
Ambien's nuts.
They had to lock your weapons up. And I mean, one guy, we found him, like, we woke up in the morning and like, his bedroom door is wide open. He's passed out butt ass naked in the hallway at the TBI clinic, laying on the ground, and like the TV's all the way up, and like, dude, it was wild.
I have some Ambien stories. In high school, I got a hold of some prior to it was the summer going into my senior year of high school. We had training camp the next day, everything, and I long story short, cooked all this food, did all this stuff, and the next morning I woke up butt ass naked at the bottom of my stairs. And my parents are like, "Hey, you're supposed to be at football practice. You're the starting quarterback for the football team." Like that was when my drug addiction was bad. But I was like, It's wild. Like I don't know if you've had.
So I've taken Ambien for sleep, but it always gave me a really bad hangover the next morning. So I would never be like fully awake. So I couldn't do it.
Terrible.
But they also gave us other things.
You're pretty much like blacked out drunk without like feeling blacked out hangover.
Yeah.
Like, and then you think while you're doing it, whatever you're doing, then you think that you're going to remember it, and the next morning it's gone.
Oh yeah. So they would give us so many different meds for sleep,
Just
try different
cocktails.
things. Like there was one that was actually an antipsychotic, and I can't remember what it is. It was a little tiny pill. It was an I Googled it because I was like, what the hell are they giving me? But that one like was the worst pill I took.
Really?
Dude, it was crazy.
Yeah.
What the hell
I
is
don't
that
know.
called? I can't remember what it was, but people have died taking it and stuff like that too. Like there's been a lot of really negative stuff to taking it, but they were giving us that for sleep. And like, I remember, at one point I was just tired and I was still in the TBI clinic. So I literally was just tired, and it was like noon one day and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to take 2 of them, I'm supposed to take 1. I'm going to take 2, whatever. No big deal.
Yep.
Dude, it knocked me out until like noon the next day, 24 hours straight,
Stuff's crazy, man.
But, I spent my time there going to different things, we were doing neurologist stuff. I saw the neurologist every day and like did all the different tests that they do every day. And then what else were we doing? I can't really remember. There were some other things that we would be involved in, that they would just make us do different things.
Yep.
I remember sitting in the neurologist office. We had taken rockets one of the nights that I was there. But 2 of them actually. It was on 9/11, or was it 9/11? No, it wasn't 9/11.
And you're in Bagram still?
Yeah, I'm in Bagram.
Yeah.
It was some significant date. I don't remember what it was. But one rocket flew right by the TBI. I'm like, all of us had just got blown up.
Shit.
Here we are still having to worry about this shit. So they took us and they put us in the hospital. It had actually gone like right by the hut, and it ended up blowing up like the tail of a like C-17 or something. And then another one like had blown up a little bit down. The road was actually called Disney. It had blown up down there. So I'm literally sitting in the neurologist the next morning, and this guy comes in and he's got like dried blood on his ears. And I'm like, is everything all right, man? And he's like, I've been here, all night. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, that rocket last night, I was standing right there. And I was like, man, like, so like talking to this guy, I like feel really bad for him, And then this guy walks in. This other guy walks in, another like Air Force guy walks in, and the guy that I'm sitting next to, his eyes light up. And he stands up and he's like, you walked by me last night. So these 2 guys were walking down the sidewalk, and when the rocket came in, they had just passed each other, and the rocket hit. And the one guy that I was initially talking to turned around to look for him, and he couldn't find him anywhere.
Oh, shit.
And he was like freaking out. He's like, oh no, because it had hit right there, and he couldn't find him anywhere. And so he searched for him for like an hour, he said. I guess it like blew him into a ditch somewhere or some shit. I don't know exactly what happened.
Damn.
But he's like tears in his eyes, and he's like, where were you? And the guy's like, I woke up, in the ditch or whatever. And then I guess like that morning he had tried to walk to the hospital, but he had done circles around the hospital because he couldn't figure out how to get in. There were plenty of doors, but he couldn't figure out how to get in until somebody literally walked up to him and was like, hey man, can I help you? It was like the 4th or 5th time that he'd passed him, and they're like, can I help you? And he was like, how do I get in? And they were like, right here.
Holy shit.
So these 2, it was so random,
silly.
Yeah, so they immediately sent him to the neurologist. But yeah, these 2 dudes had just passed each other, and then boom, one of them's gone. And he didn't even know him. Didn't even know who the guy was. But it freaked him out, He was terrified. And then seeing him, he thought it was basically like seeing a ghost because he thought he was dead.
Frick.
So, eventually they wanted to send me back to Germany to go to Landstuhl because being stationed in Italy, we were close to Landstuhl. So Landstuhl, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think this is before I joined the Army. I heard that Landstuhl, if you make it to Landstuhl alive, there's like a 96% chance that you're going to live. because Launchville's the first place you go when you leave country.
Yep. Yep.
They send you to Launchville, stabilize you, and then they bring you to Walter Reed.
Gotcha.
So they wanted to send me there, but I fought it. I missed a couple of flights, actually. They had lined up flights.
Really?
Oh, yeah, dude. So, like, there was actually this little, like, tent that had all these guys that were, like, lined up to fly to Launchville, and they put me on manifest, and I just would not show up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then they'd be like, where were you? And I'm like, I had to take a shit. You know, it was a complete lie, but I wasn't going to leave. I mean, at that point, I still wanted to go back to my guys, you know? Like, to me, it was unfinished business, you know? So I eventually talked to the neurologist, actually, it was kind of crazy. So the Sergeant Major of Afghanistan at the time was Sergeant Major Hill, and he was actually at my basic training graduation. Oh. He was like one of the top dogs in the military. And him and the battalion commander for one of the 101st Airborne Brigade battalions came to the TBI clinic to check it out. Oh. And I wish I could remember the guy's name, because he was a pretty hard charging dude. He was like, he was a badass. and you know, most officers that you see, they're not the badasses like the NCOs are. Yeah. They're the ones that got to deal with the soldiers and everything all the time. Yeah. But Sergeant Major Hill was cool as shit. And then, you know, he was like a colonel, and he was a badass. Kind of scary dude. But, you know, he's like, I said, I don't know if you remember me, but you were at my basic training graduation. He's like, man, you got a good memory. I said, well, actually.
No, I don't.
So I kind of went into detail about what happened, and I was like, man, the only thing I want to do is go back to these guys. Like, I don't have to go back out on missions. I just want to be there with them, you know? Yeah. And he's like, well, you know, who is it that makes that decision? I said, I assume it's a neurologist. You know, I see him every day. And he's like, all right, I'll meet you there tomorrow. So next morning we end up at a neurologist, and Sergeant Major Hill's there, and it was an Air Force neurologist. And he basically said, like, hey, you know, what's going on? And he told him everything. And he's like, you know, what can we do to get him back, you know, to his unit? And they were like, you know, well, if we can get him to agree, you know, his leadership to agree, he doesn't go on any more missions. Oh, so, shit. You know, I wouldn't say I was a troublemaker in the military, but I was known for like scuffling and stuff like that. And in all reality, like in the infantry, the old Army liked it because it showed that there was some fight in you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, you know, they call, Sergeant Major Hill calls my CO, and he's like, hey, you know, this Sergeant Major Hill of NATO forces, whatever, ISAF. Sergeant Major, and my CO is like, yeah, how can I help you? You know, and he's like, well, I'm sitting here with, you know, Specialist Mayor Young. And he goes, what did he do? And I was like, you know, he's like, no, he wants to come back. And my CO was like, so why are we having this conversation? You know, like, what's the problem? And then the neurologist started talking and everything. And he's like, well, we need you guys to agree that he won't go on any more missions. And they're like, yeah, no more missions. So I land, and as soon as we land, they're like, hey, you know, damn, throw us your magazines. We'll get them filled up. You got a clean uniform, blah, 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 blah. So, like, as soon as I actually get back to my guys, boom, we're right back out on mission. But, you know, got to finish out deployment like that.
What was that time span? Impact the day you got injured, you're in Bagram, then you go back to Germany, and then by the time you're coming back to...
Well, I never made it to Germany, so I never went to Germany.
No. I thought you were saying from Germany to...
No, I was in... This was still at Bagram.
Good. So what is
Cherry
that
Beasley
time?
Hospital or something. So from the actual, like, blast to where I actually got back to my guys, it was probably about 2.5 months, because I think I was about 2 months in the hospital.
Okay.
At the TBI clinic.
Yep.
And I want to say it was probably about that, you know, because it was, I would say, like, a few days I was at, you know, right after the explosion for a few days I was at Shank, and then I hung out for a few days and realized, like, I'm fucked up, you know, and so on. So,
interesting.
You know, it was, I'd say about, like, probably 2.5 months total from that time. And I mean, I was in a better place mentally. Obviously the rest helped, man, because we didn't sleep much. Yeah. So all the rest that I was getting at the TBI clinic, I mean, it wasn't fair to my guys because they were still doing the same thing. But, you know, here I am. A lot of it was resting to recover was their big thing, like sleep. They wanted you to do that. So, yeah, I mean, finished out deployment strong. A couple other guys, you know, that got injured during it but lived. Some very serious injuries. But you know, all of them are good to go. Yeah. We ended up having, you know, to fight, or we ended up fighting some other snipers. They were all Chechnyan. So, like, when the Boston bombing happened and they were like, you know, no, we've never had problems with the Chechnyans, I'm like, bullshit. Yeah. Like, we've been doing that for a long time because there was a Chechnyan mortar team that was accurate. Like, I mean, these guys were good. And we ended up finding their stuff because we had an ex-Taliban commander that would come out and meet us, like, in the middle of nowhere. So we'd go out hours early to make sure we wouldn't get ambushed. And then he would come in and we would pay him money and drop him, like, an IR strobe, a big old IR strobe. And we'd give it to him and say, all right, put it on the weapon cache. And he'd go drop it on a weapon cache. We'd fly a drone over and know exactly where it is. In the middle of the night, we'd go take it or go blow it up.
Oh, shit.
So, I mean, we played PsyOps games with these guys, and they were like, what the hell? You know, like, how do they know where this stuff is? Like, we knew all of these things, like, towards it, like, it's obviously more kinetic in the summertime than it is in the wintertime because nobody wants to fight in the cold, and not even that. I mean, there's less cover and concealment and stuff like that with, in the river bottoms and things like that. So, I mean, it all but halted towards like the last month and a half because we had them shook. They did not know, like, how do these guys know where these IEDs are? How do they know where our weapons are? We ended up taking a mortar tube that was a Chechnya mortar tube. It had a better sight than we had. It was greased and wrapped in plastic bags, brand new Chinese mortars, like all of these different things. Like, and
so things were starting to turn in your favor.
Yeah. I mean, literally, like, so there were times where they would be like, we would hear it on like ICOM and they would talk about like forces in place and they're like, is that the guys with the wings and the sword? Because our unit's flag has a wing with a sword. Okay. So like they would literally ask that question because they were like, we need to make a decision on whether or not we're going to attack them. It was crazy. Like, yeah, there were times there was a certain place, and I don't remember where it was or what village it was, but we heard it come across one time, and they were like, you guys talking to the Taliban, like, you guys can do whatever you want, but you don't cross this line, or the Americans will kill you. Huh? Yeah, it was crazy.
What would I type in to find your flag?
173rd Airborne.
173rd.
Yep. I'm just gonna check something really quick.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, it's. And after being there, now we see it everywhere. Like I could catch it out of the corner of my eye. And, I know it.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely see it. We chatted about it a little bit, but I think we can nip it in the butt. But after that, so now we're talking like kind of like long-term issue stuff, like dealing with the concussion stuff. How has that transpired for you? Because everybody that's listening to this knows I've had 5 concussions, 3 of them very serious, knocked out in 2 of them. But how is that taken hold for you now that we're a ways from that?
Me and you had talked about the memory stuff and like that, like, I think you kind of highlighted it so well that day when we were out shooting, where you talked about like the anger that would come behind it. You know what I mean?
Confusion, because you don't know how to feel.
Like somebody that is used to being self-aware and detailed and things like that, and then you forget things, and the major things were the scariest, like forgetting little things that were said in passing or forgetting something while I was preoccupied doing something else was reasonable.
Yeah.
But when I forgot something that was like major, like birthdays, holidays, like the day before I'd be thinking about it. And then like by the next morning,
it's gone.
I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's today? And they're like, today it's this day. And that was, there was confusion, and then whatever emotion that confusion turned into. I had to adjust in a sense of like note taking, organization. That was a big thing, carrying a notepad in my pocket. And I still do, obviously, with my job, being in sales. I have a customer call me while I'm doing something. I got to write that stuff down, or I'd like leave a quick like voice memo on my phone or something like that.
It's huge.
So it's, like the conversation, and obviously I'm sure we're going to get into it, but the conversation we had about the concussion stuff's been a blessing. Because I've always wondered, like, what can I do to reverse what's happened.
There's a lot now, man. There's a lot now. Prior to, there wasn't. The big dividing line, the black or white, is we used to believe that we couldn't regenerate neural tissue. And it's the hardest to regenerate, but through medical and supplementation intervention, we can, and we can increase that rate. That's the biggest thing.
And I think, like, back to the feeling thing, like when I had my kid, obviously, I was married up until earlier this year, having a family, and then like every time we're watching the news and, an athlete does something crazy because of, concussions and things like that through their career, I start like thinking like, man, like, because my kid took over everything, there were things I was never in my entire life. Obviously I'm afraid of snakes and spiders and heights, but like there were things I was never afraid of, you know what I mean? And then you have a child and like, you start worrying about things. So like, so I would have never worried about like, what could this possibly do to me in the future? Not just, the brain injury, but paired with, post-traumatic stress. Like people do crazy shit. And is there a chance?
People have done crazy shit going through way less than what you and your guys had to go through.
Yeah.
Too,
So, I mean, there was that fear that's like, man, like, when I see people that like hurt their families and stuff, like, how can somebody do that, But then they like, and I don't know if it's just a cop out. Maybe they actually had some like, real problems. Well, obviously, concussions and things that causes are real problems, but maybe they actually already had some issues that were underlying, and it wasn't that, they had the brain damage and stuff. So, I was always like, man, like how, am I ever capable of something like that? There was a fear in it, I mean, things I never worried about, you know what I mean? Like
kids change your whole life, dude. Yeah.
Man,
because now you in what you did, and there's parallels in high level sports and all that too.
Yeah.
But you don't give your responsibility is you, and in what you did, your guys, and now you have this family. Like things change for me. I mean, I used to chew all the time. When I had my wife, I thought about it, and I'm like, because I had to go get a lesion taken out of my mouth, I thought about it. I was like, if my selfish ass chewing, I get cancer and I die and I leave my wife here, like that's the small stuff, with your son now, like something happens because I didn't take the steps for this concussion and this issue, that's on me.
Yeah.
That's
well, I got life insurance because I still want to skydive. So.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things that I look at that I would have done, reckless things that I would have done. And
when my cousin Lance comes in town, he got to get certified in the Marine Corps. Gosh dang it, I forgot the name of it, but civilian course that you get to go through, and so he's had, I want to say 200 jumps.
Oh, so like
military
free fall school.
Yep. So he's done a lot of that.
Down in like Yuma, Arizona, or wherever they do that. I believe that's where it is. Yeah.
He's been doing a lot of that, and so he really dives into that.
I know. I just talked to my buddy, one of my really good friends, and this will be another quick, thing. British guy. I love talking shit with him, you know what I mean? 4th of July is always the best. And he was British Army, and then he went to U.S. Army. And I remember while I was at Shank, right after the injury, I was in the hospital, and he actually came in and saw me because he was Battle Company, 2nd Battalion. So he was really close with my best friend.
Yep.
But he was in another platoon when my buddy's platoon was out somewhere else. So he actually came and saw me in the hospital because I ran into one of the guys in the hospital when I was there that was in his platoon. And, he's like, what happened? And I told him and everything. Actually, it was this guy, Cortez. He got he is in Restrepo. And he was in that fight, and pretty cool dude. He's actually one of the guys I really like in that because he talks about, like, you can see, like, the raw emotion with him.
Yeah.
Where it really messes
Cortez, you said?
Cortez, yeah. And he has just had a baby. So, like, we were talking about it and stuff, and he was like, I'll let the guys know you're here, So he went back and he told him, and my buddy Scott, and I won't get into his last name and stuff, but he came and saw me, and he's like, man, I'll be here to keep you company soon. And I'm like, what do you mean, dude? Don't say that. It's not funny. Yeah. And he's like, man, I'm just picking. And like 1 week after that, he ended up getting blown up and had like hairline fractures. It was like 70% of his body.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So not long after that, after we got back, he ended up leaving, and he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. But he went back to selection and got selected, went through the Q course and everything, ended up in getting his beret and everything. Yeah. He's actually a sniper instructor now. An incredible guy. I mean, last time, I was in Colorado, I called him and was like, what are you doing? Yep. And he's like, he's so funny, dude. He'll send me like, the ones that you open up and it's like a chick moaning.
Oh yeah.
Dude, he does that stuff at the worst times.
I remember when that came off, when it was like when I was in high school and college. And so you'd take your phone out in class and just freaking loud as hell.
So and the thing that gets me is like, I won't talk to him for weeks, you know what I mean? And then he'll send me something and it says to open it. So I'm like, oh, this must be good. You know what I mean? I know better now. Yeah. But like, then I would like get excited and open it, and
delete that shit.
And I'm like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, dude. So I got to see him and hang out with him and, kind of talk about the things that he's been doing. He had just gotten back from a deployment, and, me and him had kind of gotten into the long range stuff, talking about it and things like that. So he told me some, obviously I hadn't just gotten, because this was recently. Yeah. I hadn't just gotten into long range stuff, but me and him had talked about it back when I was still in.
Yep.
So he was excited, he went to sniper school and then had he was 3 deployments with his ODA. And so he got to tell me some stories, and that was cool. He's like, I don't tell anybody these stories, but just because of, you kind of getting me wanting to do the long range thing, like we need to talk about this. So we had some great conversations about that, getting to see him, and now he's an instructor, and I mean, really good dude.
That's sweet, man.
But that was, one of those things. There's always funny things that happen on deployment. And I remember the funny things more than anything. These are the ones I want to remember. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 guys, and this one, I know I'm just kind of getting into stories, but
no, dude, that's what this is fucking for.
And these guys are reminding me of Dumb and Dumber. Like, they were awesome dudes. Everybody loved them. But
dipshit 1 and 2.
Oh my goodness, man! Like they, if there was like a walking and talking version of Zero Fucks, like that was these 2 guys. Like, and the first time I really realized it, because I was always like, maybe it's just a big act. The first time I really realized it is, so where you use the bathroom when you're there is not out. There are porta potties and stuff like that, but when you have to piss, like they take like an 8-inch or a 10-inch PVC pipe. And it's like 20 foot long, and they bury 10, I guess it would have to be like about waist level. So, they would bury 14, 15, 16 feet, 16, 17 feet, whatever in the ground. And so you would pee in the tube, and then the ground would absorb it, but it would absorb it deep enough to where, the whole place didn't smell like piss. Yeah. And worst was in the winter when everything froze, because then people keep pissing in it, and it just fills up with frozen piss. Oh, shit. Yeah, it was awful. And then it takes forever to melt because it's underground, all that stuff. So somebody brought up, like, we'll pay you to lick the inside of the rim of the piss tube. And I was like, there ain't no way. Like, nobody would do this. There is absolutely no way. Oh. So, and actually, I got dysentery. I got dysentery in Afghanistan. And, I know this, I'm probably going to sound like an idiot saying this, but I didn't even know that stuff was real. I thought it was an Oregon Trail. It's real. Oh. And I found out because I was sleeping and my stomach started hurting. It felt like somebody had pins in their hand and were just squeezing my stomach when I was laying down. Then I would sit up and it would feel better. And I would drink like a sip of water to try to make my stomach feel better, lay back down, puke the whole thing up. Ooh. And the only way that I could actually lay there or fall asleep was when I was leaned up against the wall. And so I walk outside and I'm throwing up. This trash can I remember was empty when I got there. And I was throwing up in this trash can, and I ended up throwing up, and things came out of both ends. And ooh. Oh, dude, it was so bad. Like, I literally I was standing there in my PT shorts. I took my PT shorts off, and it's in the middle of the night. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I threw them in the trash can and butt naked walked to the shower. Oh. So I get a shower and everything, and I get out of the shower and I'm walking back because I didn't take a towel or anything with me. I really wasn't thinking. Yeah. And I'm walking back, and 2 of my buddies come walking by to go to guard, and they're like, Mayor? And I was like, gentlemen, kind of thing. But I couldn't get back to sleep, so I ended up going to the doc and saying, "Hey, I messed up," Mm-hmm. And they actually gave me 2 IVs full of fluid, and then two IV bags full of antibiotics.
I was going to ask what they do for it,
and then gave me Finagrin for throwing up. And Finagrin makes you feel drunk, so that was the first time since I'd been in country where I was like, "Oh man, I'm messed up," because we weren't drinking or anything. And I slept for 36 hours. Oof. I lost a ton of weight too. I say a ton of weight, but it was 12 pounds.
That's a lot.
It is.
A few days,
it is, yeah. Because I hadn't eaten, I was throwing up and everything else. They would come and check my pulse and check on all my vitals and stuff like that while I was knocked out.
Damn. You just hear about people getting dysentery. You don't think you're ever going to get it.
No, I was like, whatever, man. Where would you have to live to get that? Apparently, you could live in Afghanistan and get it. There were a ton of us that ended up getting it. It was because the Afghans would go and get the water out of the river, but they used the bathroom in the river. So we were taking that water and putting it in our shower, but we were the Afghans were supposed to sanitize it before they did it. And then we went in our, where do you get water from when you're there, right? You just have drinking water. So our hand washing water was all supposed to be sanitized, and they tested the hand washing water, and our hand washing water was dirtier with fecal matter than the actual shower water was. So, they basically, I had just gotten over dysentery, and they were like, lick the inside of the piss tube. And I'm like, man, that is a horrible idea, but there's no way that he's going to do it. Nobody's going to do that. You know what I mean? There's 130 people here that piss in that tube. Including women, because they have this thing called a shiwi, and they can pee standing up. Yeah. So we had an EOD chick, and she was a badass. She was 6'3", man, and she was married to a 7th group dude, and she was a badass. Yeah. We got a couple gunfights with her, and I was like, all right, I'm cool with that.
She's all right.
She didn't give a shit. Mm-hmm. So he's like, all right, how much are you guys gonna give me? And they're like, I'll give you $100 because we don't have anything to spend money on. We got a little bazaar, and it was $5 a monster. I drank the shit out of those things. I probably spent probably 10 grand on monsters.
Yeah.
But, because the Afghans would bring them to us and they were $5 a piece. I mean, the amount of money that they were making was insane. And then they had all bootleg DVDs and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So, somebody's like, I'll give you $100. And he's like, not enough. It ended up being like $1,300.
Oh, I was going to say, it better be over $1,000.
Nowadays, $1,300? No, I wouldn't do it. But Army times,
and you don't have any.
I'd probably do it and then go to the medics and be like, hey, I need some. I
need some antibiotics.
So he then we had pictures and videos. They were like, I went to look back a couple of years back, and they've been taken offline. Well, so that was one of the guys, and so we were actually out at that JSS Evans, and this is probably one of my funniest stories from being over there. Because these two guys, I mean, that was just them. That was the shit that they did, and they were mortar guys. And we were in a gunfight, and one of them looked at the other just in time. He was wearing a shirt to see a round impact right here and make a nipple in his shirt like that. But he thought that it had actually hit his buddy. So he tackles him onto the ground, and he's like, you're hit. And his buddy's like, nah, man, I'm good. He's like, no, it's the adrenaline. You're hit. I watched it. You're hit. So the other one starts freaking out because he thinks he's been shot.
Yeah.
And then he lifts up his shirt and notices that he's not shot. And he's like, nah, man, you're good. And he's like, no, it's the adrenaline. I'm hit. And we're in the middle of the fight, and we all just kind of stop. And we're like, what the hell is going on over there? And that was just, these two guys, it was always like that, and like, picking on each other while we're on patrol. I'm like, we're supposed to be a little more serious in this, but it was, but again,
you're doing it repetitively all the time. It's routine.
Yeah. And it was, it's easy to become complacent when you do things like that, and every once in a while we get a wake up call, whether it was a close call or somebody.
IEDs or.
Yeah. And fortunately, like, I can't look back and say that anybody was injured because of any American was injured because of another American's negligence.
Yeah.
There were times we almost got shot by the Afghan army because they would, I don't know how they did it, but they figured out how to pull the safeties out of the M16s that they had. They were our old M16s.
And they still function and cycle.
And we just changed that safety the other day, so I showed you dude, they would pull the safeties out of them. And the gun would function because they would have NDs.
What the hell?
So, dude, it was so weird. There was a handful of times where, there was almost some serious incidents and things like that. But,
That's crazy, man. I want to, before we stop this at all, I do want to get into like the long range shooting just a little bit.
Absolutely.
You told me just the other day again, what was that thing in Douglas, Wyoming? The
Sniper Adventure Challenge.
The Sniper Adventure Challenge.
It's oh man, I can't even think of what it's called right now.
What?
The organization that does it.
I'll look it up. Sniper.
I can think of the skull and everything because it's much like our company's logo from the Army. But
yep. Competition Dynamics.
Competition Dynamics.
Yep.
God, I
There we go.
can't think of that. So they hold a couple of different competitions in between Douglas, Wyoming, and like New Mexico.
Okay.
And the Sniper Adventure Challenge is something that I came across because I was looking for competitions to shoot. And that was like a serious deal. Like, I was telling you about it. The first year they did it, there was only a handful of teams that even did it. And a lot of the guys needed help getting back. They were administering IV because I was following them at the time. They were administering IVs in the field to these guys so they would make it back. And then I want to say like 3 teams finished. Yeah, and then the next year, more people did it.
Yeah. Well, for people that just thinking about this, like how fucking crazy it is though too, you and your partner will undergo tests involving land navigation, practical shooting, long range shooting, clearing houses, field craft, problem solving, all this. 2-man teams will be required to navigate 30 to 60 plus miles. So they give you this 30 to 60. It could easily be over 60.
Yeah. So what it is, the reason they do the 30 to 60 is because like there's events that you can go and do, or you can skip them. But you get points for doing those events. So they'll help you. I don't know if they take off time or exactly how it works. But I know like the first year they did it, like you could literally just go straight through and do none of the extra events and only shoot and like win. And it was like a super short distance and things like that. Because I talked to somebody about it. So like that's where that comes in because you can choose to skip things. So you're basically looking at a minimum 30 miles. And that's if you don't do the extra stuff.
Yeah, and it says there's no support crew permitted.
No, you have a tracker on you. So they make you carry a tracker so they know where you're at all times.
Wow.
Like you have a GPS tracker on you and you have to have it. Each person has one.
This is legit.
Because I mean, you're thinking like mountains of Wyoming, man, you know?
Oh, it's ugly. Approximate maximal target distance, 1,500 for rifles, carbine at 500, pistols at 100. Just lock picking, escape and evasion, comms, code breaking. It's legit, dude.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that somebody put this together is awesome because I mean, they're all like practical applications for, you know, many different things. I mean, obviously, if I'm saying lock picking being a practical application, it can be, you know what I mean?
Definitely could be.
But just, you know, most of the people that are involved in, you know, the sport shooting stuff and that type of thing enjoy these types of things. And they like these trade crafts and things like that. You know,
I mean, even me, I like the pushing your body to a physically exhausted limit where you know you don't even want to be, but you're there. And
me and you talked about that one. You know, that
learning from you on the practical side of it, the shooting, all that stuff. I think it fits well. And
it does. I mean, you know, and it's really one of those things that like anybody could do it. You know what I mean? And you know, I think what people don't realize, and it's like competing in anything, is a lot of people are really timid to compete in things because they're like, I'm not going to do well. Nobody does well their first time. Very, very, very few people do it, you know, or do well their first time, you know, but it's literally just going out there, doing it and getting, you know, the butterflies out and, you know, I mean, if you go out there the first time and you place last, you went out there and you did it. And the next time, I bet you don't place last. Because there's actually we do the Badlands 600 here, and then they do the Badlands Steel Challenge. And one of the guys that shot the first year I went in and helped score that match, this guy placed he was in like the last 6 people.
Oh, shit.
Right? And then this year, he placed 5th.
That's huge.
I think it was...
And there's some good shooters there.
Great shooters. Like people you didn't even know existed. So like there'll be a farmer that comes out, man. Yeah. Like a 7-year-old farmer comes out and shoots it.
30-06.
Well, I mean, most of those guys, you know, they've got money and all that stuff. So they're, you know, most of those guys are shooting practical, like long range guns, you know. But I mean, there are guys out there, like a lot of these forums and stuff that you get on. You've got guys that specifically will shoot a 30-06 and push it as far as it will possibly go. And that is what they do. They'll literally be like, this is what I shoot. I shoot a 30-06. You know, we're going to shoot out to 2,000 meters with a 30-06. And most people would be like, yeah, right, whatever.
Lob and shot.
And they'll do it, you know. I mean, there's people don't realize the distance that these things reach out, you know. You know, I obviously told you about the first long range class, like formal class that I ever took. I'd been doing long range shooting and stuff for a bit of time, but I'd never taken a formal class. And I did it with Jim Gilliland from Shadow 6 Consulting. He's got the world record for the longest kill in Iraq with the 308, 1,250 meters. You know what I mean? So you look at that and you look at the max effective range of a 308, it's like 800 meters, you know?
Yep.
And 1,250 meters and you're like, holy smokes, you know?
There's a lot of variables at 1,250.
Yeah.
A lot of variables.
You know, and then, so I mean, that was a cool class. I really enjoyed taking that class and learning the formal part of everything and, you know, making adjustments with dope. You know, we ranged targets with our reticles. We did all those things. And, you know, there were times where I was, you know, me never having done a formal class, I thought I would go out there and be like middle of the pack or whatever, you know. There's a lot of guys that do a lot of shooting and compete for years and things like that. And I actually shot really well in that class. Really well in that class. Like I was impressed. But like I was just waiting to have like a bad screw up because like this one guy, he shot very, very well. And every time he would hit a target, like I would go and shoot and then I'd hit the same target. And I'm like, I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the first one to miss, but I don't want to, you know, be the second one to miss because then everybody's going to expect me to shoot well the whole time. But, you know, we had a lot of fun in that class. That was done just up in Keene. Actually, a guy I know, Ross.
Oh, I didn't know they came over here.
Well, sometimes it depends on how many people he can get to go into it. You know, a guy named Ross that I know, he's really big into the long range shooting stuff out here, Schoenwald.
Oh, I thought you were talking Ross Walker.
No, and Ross is a great guy. He's actually got a really cool range right out his back door. You know, we did it on his land up there in Keene, and he gets into a lot of, because there is actually an organization here that does like PRS shooting. I think it's like North Dakota PRS shooting or something like that. So they do it in Williston and things like that. And he's a big part of it. And he does well. He does well. Yeah. So he put it on and everything, and it was cool, man. It was a lot of fun. You know, they had the spinners and, you know, like know your limit and test your limits, which, you know, that's like a 10, 8, a 6, a 4, and a 2-inch plate. And like know your limits means that you shoot until you don't think you can hit anymore and you stop and you collect all the points before that. But if you shoot and you miss, you lose everything. Then there's test your limits and you shoot until you miss and you get all the points. So it's actually really cool.
That's really cool.
That's basically what they do for the Badlands 600. So at the Badlands 600, that target is set at 600 yards. And you basically shoot one round on each target. So you get a sighter on a big plate and then you get 1 round on each target. And what is it? I think 5. What is it? 10, 8. I remember counting on my fingers like a kid. Yeah, 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. You know, so you've got 5 targets there, and they give you 6 rounds. So 1 sighter, and then you go, but you have to hit before you move on. So you can't like miss a target and then move to the next one. And you get like a certain amount of points for each one. And that sort of thing. So that's what they do there. So it's actually really cool because I mean, you know, there's a difference between long range shooting and precision shooting.
Yep.
You know, when you're talking precision shooting, you're hitting a small target at a long distance, or long range precision, let's say, because obviously, you know, you shoot like a fly on a piece of paper at 100 yards. It's impressive. It's precision shooting, but it's not long distance.
Yep.
You know, so it's a pretty cool thing. And the cool thing about that is like you have a lot of F-class shooters. Those guys shoot at like 600 and 1,000 yards, and they shoot X's. So like there's literally the X on the paper, and if they hit the X, I think it's like 10 points or whatever it is. And I think they shoot 10 rounds on it. I've never done F-class shooting or really even looked into it, to be honest with you. I just know that I'm like extremely impressed every time a new world record comes out for a group, for a size group. So like they said that it's like 0.326 or something. I don't know exactly. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it's 0.3 something, might be the new 600-yard group, 10 rounds. Shit. That just happened like a few days ago.
Damn.
But
the learning curve is big, but having somebody, well, for me, having somebody that has had that experience, you don't hold yourself as the best shooter in the world.
Absolutely not.
But you can fucking sling some lead. You know,
I've missed coyotes at 50 yards. So.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
But that's what helped me.
Well, it's guidance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you have guidance, it's a lot cheaper because you're not learning it all on your own.
Just slinging rounds.
And there's all kinds of there's all different methods with things, you know, so you can pick up what works for you.
Yeah, man.
But there's your general basics, like your fundamentals are important. And once you get your fundamentals down, I mean, as soon as you learn your gun, like you're in good shape. And then it's reading, the environment, like the environmentals, like winds and things like that. You know, there's some stuff to that. So we're fortunate to have a guy locally that has that YouTube channel I told you.
Sniper,
for Tiborosaurus Rex. Sniper 101 is a great resource for learning everything. I mean, you could never have picked up a gun in your life, and he will teach you absolutely everything from nothing to hitting a target at 1,000 yards. And, I thought about this a lot when we were talking about the podcast stuff. And, there's certain people always say, like, those who can't do teach. And I don't particularly believe that. I mean, there are some teachers out there that, like, are amazing that never did anything big, and maybe some of it is, like, they never had their break, or maybe, they just couldn't cut it, but they understood it. So, one thing I've always said is that those who understand teach.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to understand what you're doing and convey that information
at a very basic level.
Exactly. The best, I told you about my buddy Paul, Pace Performance Shooting. I have never met somebody that can convey useful information to make you a better shooter in a sense that everybody understands the way that he does it.
Because we've all been around those people that are the smartest people in the freaking room, but they're too smart and they can't convey it.
Elon Musk.
Oh, 100%.
I've never been in that room, but so that's exactly what it is. I mean, when you have guys that understand it and understand people and are able to, process that information and then translate it into a version that other people will be able to understand. Like, those are the guys that teach. Yep. And I think with the shooting, it's one of those things that, like, you have to be able to do to be able to teach it. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, you can have the fundamentals and things like that down, and you're going to hit your targets until the environmental, until the environment starts playing a role in it. Then things change. So, I mean, you have great fundamentals. We got out shooting and getting on a tiny target at a really long range.
Yeah.
It was fairly easy for you because, I mean, obviously I know my gun, but I'm not the one pulling the trigger. I'm not the one putting, the reticle on the target or anything like that. I just know the dope. I tell you where to dial, and the rest is on you.
Yep. And I've shot a lot of elk. I've shot a lot of animals and just shooting and being around guns. But I had the basics of the fundamentals, and then you had the experience to get me there. But we couldn't have got there with me not having the fundamentals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know what I mean? I mean, my son, I've got him shooting 5? Out. He's 7 and he shot out.
500 yards, right?
Yeah, 500 yards. Yeah. So, and it took a little bit because he doesn't really have the fundamentals quite down yet. I mean, he's not that interested in guns until it's time to go shoot.
Yep.
You know, he's not one of those kids that's like, let's go shoot, let's go shoot, let's go shoot. I mean, every once in a while he's like, can we go shoot, Dad?
Well,
you know,
Bob's son, he's a little older.
And that kid loves it. Like that's a kid that's, you know, I mean, Bob's done an amazing job with his son. And it's so cool seeing that his son loves everything he loves. You know what I mean? So like going back to having kids, it changes everything, you know? Bob, you know, obviously he was a Marine. He was a combat engineer, dog handler. You know, and he's always been a shooter, but like when he came out here, it changed everything. Because he's from North Carolina too, you know, like if we shoot deer in North Carolina, they're little whitetail and we're shooting them at 100 yards tops across a field, you know, but out here, if you're getting, you know, like my deer last year was, 568, 565.
Yeah.
That's how far I shot my deer last year. You know, and that
impressive.
was like, I didn't want to get any closer because he was a big boy and I didn't want him to get up and run off and then I'd have been pissed, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, and now he shoots more than just about anybody I know. Mm-hmm. He gets around the state a lot. So he's fortunate. He gets around the state a lot. And every time he's somewhere, he goes to the gun shop.
Oh, yeah.
And he sees what they have, you know, for components. Loves to reload. Never was into reloading or any of that stuff before, you know, when I first met him. But, you know, and he never had anything like, he just had your basic like Mossberg 500 shotgun and you know your Savage whatever Axis.
It's
for
an
a
easy
gun.
rabbit hole to go down.
And then he starts realizing, like, starts seeing some of these guys that have some nice stuff, and he's like, man, I need to do that, you know. And I mean, he's got a ton of knowledge in that stuff now. And he's a great shooter.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably end up learning a lot of reloading from him.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and it's a valuable thing to have, especially where where everything's at now. Cause you look at like a box of 6.5 Creedmoor now, and some people have it for like $65 for 20 rounds.
Yeah.
You know, but for $65, I can buy a pound of powder, 100 primers, 100 bullets, you know, and as long as I have the brass, like we're good to go.
5 times the freaking load.
Yeah. You know, and then like buying good brass, you're starting to see brass show up a little bit more. So like buying a good brand of brass, like, you know, I shoot Lapua, and I mean, I've got like 7 loadings through the 200 that I'm running through right now.
Yeah. Well, it's October 15th. And we're starting to see stuff come back on the shelves a little bit. Primers are like the last thing that really
but I think
hasn't.
some of that stuff's going to start disappearing too, because everybody that's been looking, that's getting ready to start hunting when they start thinking about it. You know, like we have elk opener next weekend. Obviously me and Tony heading over to Montana for his tag.
I'm heading out to Wyoming.
Are you?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So I mean, that's going to be a heck of a thing. And we have deer season coming up here. You know, rifle season.
It's going to go quick.
Yeah, it's going to, and I think we'll go through that, and then we may start see some things next year, you know. Some people are like very like pessimistic about it, like we won't see anything for years, and I'm like, you're starting to see shit. There are going to be things that we won't see for a while.
Yeah, we're having supply chain issues, and we'll get it to where it is.
That stuff's nuts.
It's kind of scary.
It is, and you know, I think some people, you know, there's different understandings for what's causing it.
Yeah.
You know, they're saying like there's no trucks. There's a ton of trucks.
There's a shit ton of trucks.
Yeah, and they're just sitting in parking lots waiting to pick up loads and things like that. So like, you know, it's going to be interesting. I think when people start, because I've heard like it's port personnel issues, like getting sick and things like that. So I mean, but like, didn't they say there was like 65 cargo ships or something at one point?
Yeah, I think it was like 65, 66.
And it could be more than that now. Who knows? You know, I got a guy that I served with, and he's into like import export stuff, and he actually. His company flew their helicopter over the bay, and he took a picture of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, man.
And I see it in the sales that I'm doing. You know, a lot of that stuff either comes in parts from China, or I mean, we do a lot with like there's pump companies and stuff like that in Eastern Europe and in those sort of areas. And you know, normally we would see those things in like 4 to 6 weeks come across the water, and now they're like you're looking at 6 months. You know,
and could be longer.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate the time.
Dude, I appreciate.
We flew through 2.5 hours.
Well, you know, we always have good conversation, and
Yeah.
I think like I think some people might find my conversation interesting. Maybe
a lot.
So I mean, it's just, you know, fun things I enjoy talking about.
Yep. Well, it's experience that not a lot of people can visualize. But as you're saying this, and so sometimes you'll see me, I'll just kind of like be looking fucking out nowhere. But like when you were telling this story and stuff, like I was visualizing like, okay, the first time you got to this chow hall and you see all these Air Force guys, and I'm like visualizing this new person in country, not knowing the fuck's going on, you know?
Yeah, I was lost, man. It was crazy. You know, you feel like a kid in the big world again. You
Yeah.
know, I'm a grown man, you know? And then some of the people you work with, this is, you know, their 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th time there.
Yeah. And so like, I think people can visualize that. And I think that's why your story is very cool too. It's very detailed. It's, comes down to the very millisecond. And
there were times where I had to like stop because I mean, there's more detail I could have got into on things, but obviously don't want to drag it out for too long. But I mean, there's a lot of things that I remember, best and worst times of my entire life happened in that place. Yep. And, I've told you and I've told everybody, like, I wouldn't do a single thing differently. Yeah. But I wouldn't want anybody I cared about to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I say, like, go a different route. Air Force.
Coast
Guard. You like swimming? Join the Coast Guard.
Exactly, man.
So, no, I enjoy sharing things, and I've found that over the years, with, like post-traumatic stress and things like that, I've read some books and flipped through a couple of books by Dave Grossman. He's got On Combat and On Killing, and On Killing, he talks about, like, the importance of, venting and talking about things.
Huge.
In Vietnam era, didn't talk about things and the issues that it's caused for those guys.
And that's what I was saying with my uncle. He went in Vietnam, had killed a lot of people. And we're actually trying to get a trip planned so he can go over to Vietnam, see the country, see the people, see this stuff, get him a little bit of closure. But I have a podcast recorded, but there's awesome. Some stuff that he said on the podcast that the courts didn't know about too. So we're gonna wait till he.
No, I completely understand that. That's I mean, I think I told you about the guy that I worked with. Him and his father I worked for them actually for their company, and my buddy was like, my dad's an asshole, and he never jokes or plays. He's never talked about his time overseas, and me and his dad got along great because, like, me being a talkative person, he'd like, "Shut up, Morgan," and I'm like, "All right," so I'd shut up, and then literally 30 minutes later, he'd come back and be like, "Man, are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you told me to shut up," and he's like, "Man, just talk. Like, I can't stand the silence, So we always got along like that, and one day, it was actually at the time where I was reading the book, and I read that portion where it talked about guys from Vietnam, like, more or less imploding because they weren't talking about things and the trouble that it was causing and the problems that it was causing. And that night on the way home, he started talking to his son about stuff, and that we were going on days off at that time. And then when we went back on days on, my buddy comes to me, he's like, "What the fuck did you do to my dad?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "He won't stop fucking with me. He's always laughing. He's always having a good time. I'm trying to sleep on the way to work and he's enjoying himself." Yeah. And he's like, "What did you do? What did you tell him?" Because he's talking to me about Vietnam now. And I was like, "Well, this is
completely different person.
They're best friends now." Yep. I mean, it's talking about things. I notice I do a lot of talking with veterans, and I don't talk about my experiences when I talk to these guys because it's my time to listen. Mm-hmm. And there are times where I notice after the conversations I have that, like, something's eating at me. And then I'll go talk to somebody and I feel better. Yeah. Because I'm listening to their stories and seeing how similar they are to mine, but I don't want to bring up my stories to these guys to cast any kind of shadow over theirs. My job at that point is to listen. But
then it's bringing up stuff in your head.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I'm living with it until I can get it out there and talk to somebody about it. And 10 out of 10 times I feel better after talking about it.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, I think that's what we need right now in our world.
Yeah, really. And that's why I don't mind sharing, man. Yeah, there's so many people that don't want to share things, and you see, like, I mean, I lost more guys to suicide than I ever did in the military.
It's fucked.
And seeing it's scary, man.
Yeah, it can happen like that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I call these guys. I would talk to two of the guys that I was in the service with today. Mm-hmm. I call these guys on a regular basis, just like, "Hey, man, checking in. Yep. How's life?"
Yep.
You're
on Instagram, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your handle on Instagram?
Morgan MY.
Awesome. Well, people can catch up with you there too, man, and. I think we could probably have 2 or 3 or 4 more podcasts at some point. Man, you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
absolutely. That'll wrap it up. I got some athletes coming in, and I appreciate your time, dude.
I appreciate being on here. Yeah. Like I said, love the conversation.
I think it'll be good. So you guys check out his stuff on Instagram, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.